thank you all there at home for being here. This is the Small Council, which you have Saturdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, right? And we're actually starting on time. It's unfucking believable. But anyway, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. Consider becoming a YouTube member by hitting that join button, supporting the channel that way. It helps us out a ton. And consider jumping on one of our live showings, right? We got the links up here at the top, right? So stop by that Twitch link for when we do this live and be a part of the Twitch chat here. We'd love to have you. Okay, I have a group of amazing guests. Right? I'm very happy to have them. New faces, love to see it. So I'm going to introduce them and we'll get started. All right, first we'll start with my man, MVP. We call him Joe Lewis. Joe Lewis, thanks for being around. How are you doing today, my friend?
Yeah, I'm doing well. This was the first Saturday in a while where I felt like I got some stuff done. So that was kind of nice. But yeah, for those who may not know who I am, I'm Joe Lewis. I cover educational politics on Twitch. And if that's something that might interest you and you're like the 1% of the 1% that finds that kind of interesting, you can find me at twitch.tv/Joe Lewis, the O being 0. And the same is on my Twitter. It's the same exact handles. But yeah, glad to be here. Hope everyone's doing well. And it's a good topic, so I'm kind of excited.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. Next we'll go to Black American Made. Look, right? I like having Black American Made on, right? I, as the number one Piece fan out there, right? I like, helping like my juniors, right? My lessers here, like I got to bring you up to my level, right? So like when I come here, I give you an education, I school you, right? And it's for your own good. And so that's why I let you on my panels every time. How you doing?
I respect it. I want to be just like you when I grow up. that's the goal. Every day, a little bit at a time. But no, I'm doing really good. Yeah, like I get excited every time he has me up to do a panel. So I'm super excited to be here. I've a couple people, April and Mr. Girl, I've never haven't been acquainted with, so this is my first time seeing y'all. And yeah, it should be overall pretty fun. Y'all know my stuff. It's literally my name, Black American Made, on mostly YouTube, but also on Twitch. Follow me. Just do it.
Thank you. All right. Next we have Mr. Girl, not new to the stream, but new to this particular show. Mr. Girl, thank you for coming back, being here. You are taken off out there. Like I feel like everything you do is fire nowadays. How does that feel? I wouldn't know.
It feels good. I don't want to fuck it up, so I get nervous. I talked to Richard Spencer last night, so that was. I think I handled it well, but I was afraid I would. I was afraid.
Be a
I'd
white
sort of,
nationalist apologist.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I have like some Jew insurance, like on my face, but still, it would not be good to basically allow him to use me as like a mouthpiece for his views. And he's very smart. He's very, very, very smart. So, yeah. I'm nervous. That's how I feel. I feel excited. I feel smug. I feel proud. I feel happy and I feel scared. I hate myself. I feel bad and I feel angry.
Okay. Well, the full gamut of emotions.
A lot going on. It's a very emotional time.
I bet it is. But Mr. Girl, I'm glad you stopped by, spent a little time with us. I don't think there's too much to be scared of here, especially since this is less of a like super debate.
My chat's warning me about Joe Lewis.
Oh, well, man. They're doing a good job.
They've also warned me about Joe Lewis.
Yeah.
Apparently, you have a reputation.
They said he's a.
You got nothing to worry about. As long as you're not a fence sitter or a right winger, you'll be fine.
They said that you're bad faith and that you're gonna try to make me seem bad faith. So I don't know what to believe. I don't know who to believe.
We'll see in like 3 hours then, yeah.
Because you're black.
Okay. Well, that's it. Next we have a brand new face, right? April, thank you for coming through. It was really nice. A mutual individual, a friend, put us in contact. I'm very happy they did. Right? You seemed like you're also making the rounds. People want to be talking to you, so I want to be talking to you because like I like bandwagons. So, April, how are you doing?
Doing great. I think that I'm in a similar position to Mr. Girl to a lesser extent. Destiny's community just likes me, so I leech off of him for viewers, and they're super nice. So I've just been dipping my toe a little bit into politics, having a good time, trying to represent, maybe dissident or strange, politics you don't see every day, and maybe learn something new, talk to people, listen to their ideas.
Okay.
So yeah, good stuff.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad that you're having a good time. And I know that Destiny orbiting lifestyle. I get that, man. It's real. Okay.
Now that he's back from his trip, I just know my viewers are going to plummet.
You'll be fine, I'm sure. Everyone, please check out April. And last but absolutely not least, we have our Dark Lord in here. Yes, his name is Doobie. He's back with us once again. Doobie, one of my favorite people to talk to. Doobie, how are you feeling today?
I'm doing very well. Very excited to be here with lots of nice people. And yeah, I'm Doobie.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get cracking.
Oh, wait, 1 second. All the people in Mr. Horse's chat or Mr. Girl's chat telling them to yeah, Mr. Horse, that's your name now. All those people telling him to mount me, right? That's not cool, okay? Like, that's kind of rapey, a little weird. And as you can see by my rock, I've got pretty good mounting strats. I don't know if you can do it. So you're asking to bite off a piece of something he can't handle. So just be careful.
Wow.
Okay, great. So, moving on. The topic. In the world of social media, a lot of irresponsible communication occurs. This seems especially true when it comes to conservative media. Oftentimes, people who know better flirt with conspiracy theories like QAnon. This can be done for profit or simple acceptance, but the results are the same. It spreads a destructive ideology. Are we responsible for the harm and potential harm done to the world by the things we say? If some speech can be demonstrated to lead to bad outcomes, should we stifle someone's ability to speak it? Or is the fact that someone has the ability to speak the most important overriding concern? So, yeah, as you guys know, right, we live in a moment of conspiracy theories, of just like extremely destructive ideologies in general, right? Like far right ideologies that are spreading, and people who may not be a part of those, right, still like advertise those things. I think that there is room for a discussion as to is it most important that they be able to simply speak, right? That their First Amendment rights are unimpeached, or that we take a second look at these things and say that some speech is just too dangerous. So we'll go around and we'll discuss. All right, so opening statements first. Start with my man, Joe Lewis.
Yeah, to address the question directly, are we responsible for the harm or potential harm done to the world by things we say? Yes. But I'm not really concerned about that because I think that's like the easier thing to approach. The more challenging thing, I think, is the second question that you posit. So I believe that we should try our best to alleviate the circumstances that lead to bad outcomes. And I also feel that all outcomes are possible, specifically with political speech. And I think that organizations and people are just trying to just utilize, maintain, and gain different types of power. And maybe we can have I have a definition for power, and maybe if we need to, we can like work out on that idea, because there's a lot of steps within that. And maybe we'll have some time to hash that out. But again, generally, I think that we should be prioritizing the circumstances that lead to bad outcomes, as opposed to trying to overtly address bad outcomes. I think that, to make this a bit more direct, if people are kind of getting lost, is that I think that when you directly address bad outcomes and try to prevent bad outcomes, you're going to just inherently inhibit people's individual liberties and group autonomy. And I don't think it's going to help in the long term. So I think alleviating circumstances, excuse me, is something we should prioritize.
Thanks so much. Black American Made.
Yeah, I think that I have no idea everybody in here's political leanings necessarily, but like from a basic standpoint, most people understand that free speech is in relation to like government, like specifically government impact, like the concept of being imprisoned. And I think I think the way we currently handle speech is probably um pretty close to my version of ideal. I believe that internet spaces and websites should be disincentivized, like from a profit perspective, to allow like any type of any type of speech that's like demonstrably unpopular and harmful, um, and considered to the detriment of society. I think the best thing we can do is um, what Prime does is get people together and sort of push back against this type of speech, because I don't think there's a useful model we can look at of truly controlling or limiting people's speech, even the ones we consider super harmful. And like I said, the more particulars of that we can go into in the open.
Mr. Girl, please.
Well, I think that restricting speech is a bad outcome, so it doesn't make that much sense to me to do that to prevent other bad outcomes. So I have a couple like kind of lenses through which to view this. So one is a lot of the stuff we say is promoted by social media algorithms, and those algorithms promote things that feel good or feel bad, get people to click on them, and that's usually not the truth. So I think that's partly their fault. On an individual level, if you're saying things you know aren't true, probably shouldn't say them. So then that's like Joe Rogan is another lens where it's like he'll have people on and he'll entertain ideas where he doesn't seem to really know what he's talking about, but then he'll say, I kind of don't know what I'm talking about, so it's okay. But I think he ends up spreading a lot of misinformation that way. And then I guess you're asking, like, should we allow that? I don't know who you mean by we. If you mean social media companies, I think they're actively promoting misinformation, so they should stop. I don't think the government should step in, though, if that's what you're getting at. I think we got to have free speech. That's it.
Thanks so much. April.
Yeah, so I'm a fan of free speech, but I agree with sort of what Mr. Girl is talking about. I think these social media platforms, they're optimized to keep you clicking, keep you engaging over and over. They're not optimized to promote the speech that most benefits society. And so there's a sort of toxic, destructive effect in the kinds of speech that people pursue is oftentimes not the most truthful. So while I don't necessarily think we should regulate free speech or ban people from the platforms for, spreading, this position or that position necessarily, I think what we do need to do is make sure we're mandating like a neutral way for these ideas to be interacting with each other. So ideas should be put against one another. And we see that when we ban certain kinds of speech, what ends up happening is it goes somewhere like Telegram, and the community gets more concentrated and less receptive to outside influence or towards deprogramming from other more, compelling ideas. So what I think we need to do is we need to adequately platform these ideas, or platform bad ideas versus good ideas. And the way you do that is by putting them in a neutral environment where both can be expressed honestly against each other. And so my goal would not necessarily be ending free speech or banning ideas necessarily, but really trying to create that like neutral environment where the goal is not necessarily keeping people clicking, but optimizing for truth. So that's my position.
Thank you. Doobie.
So I think I don't know. So I'm very like in favor of free speech that allows it where in such that it means like you can discuss ideas, right? Because I think it's extremely important to get people to discuss the reasons they believe the things that they think they believe.
Well,
Right?
the shit you say, you need it.
Well, okay. However, right? I think that I think there's a line, right? And I'm not really sure where that line is. I was on a panel, one of your panels, Prime, the other day, with this ANCAP dude, right? Who said that he would allow people to like intentionally, knowingly, like spread misinformation, right, about COVID and COVID vaccines. And he thinks that there is no line, basically. And if people want to say it, they should be able to say it, no matter the consequence to everybody else. And even if we can demonstrate that their speech, their expressions of whatever, are leading to like demonstrable like harm in the real world and leading to people dying and shit. Well, even still, people want to say this thing, and that's like some divine right that they have. So we just can't stop it. I don't think that's realistic. I don't think that's like reasonable. So I think there is a line somewhere, though. I'm very sympathetic to all the arguments about letting people discuss their ideas, and and if you try to shut people down, they kind of get into like echo chambers where they just kind of harden against all the opposing opinions, and it's much more difficult to reach them. So I'm very sympathetic to those arguments, but I don't think the line is just like not there. I think there is a line somewhere, and I think that once we find the line, we do need to enforce it.
Open to the panel.
I mean, I don't know, because I'm like super small as a content creator. Like, where, how powerful are the algorithms that we always discuss when you come to this? Like,
Extremely.
Incredibly powerful.
They're your audience. Your audience is not people. For the most part, your audience is a robot, and then the robot decides if the robot takes a sample of what some people think of you and analyzes their behavior, and then decides how many more people it wants to show you to. But yeah, so like your core audience is like the kindling, and the robot is like pours the gasoline on it, you know.
I mean,
like modern social media cannot survive without an algorithmic way of doing it.
I don't know. The reason I ask is, well, not. I mean, yeah, I guess that's the answer to that question. I think the next part of that is, it seems that, I don't know, that like there a lot of misinformation out there, especially when we deal with like our media, absolutely. But I feel like, I don't know. I feel like part of that is the media being representative of, like, I think it's like a circular wave. Like, real people do believe the things that we're seeing in terms of like our media, and the media is probably exasperating that and creating more people.
Doesn't your Twitter profile say something about like a 9/11 conspiracy theory?
It's my Twitter profile is the first the opening scene to a show called Boondocks. If you haven't seen the show, you hadn't get it, but if you have seen the show, you do get it.
I don't get it.
But yeah, it's not like an actual conspiracy theory.
Oh, so you don't think that Bush did 9/11 or anything?
No, it's all part of the show.
It's a black thing. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, basically.
Well, maybe you guys can teach me.
I think that
Something that you
the interesting question is in regards to speech that is like, wholly destructive. I think we can agree that like, if you're an objective observer, you could observe that some speech is objectively negative and degrades the conversation for all sides. So speech that is just like blatant misinformation, I think degrades the conversation for all sides. But It's one thing to acknowledge that in a perfect world, we could identify that kind of speech. And another thing to acknowledge that in the real world, the kind of fact checkers that we often have as a neutral arbiter are not so neutral. And a lot of times we see, like, in the case of like Snopes, they tend to lean a little bit left. And so when it comes down to something that is a little bit borderline, like maybe it's slightly true, maybe it's slightly untrue, these sorts of like fact checkers, if they have a liberal bias, are going to slightly lean towards benefiting the progressive side. And so I think anytime we start introducing like quote unquote neutral arbiters that are going to limit or regulate speech, we have to be very careful about making sure that they're actually neutral. And I might even go so far to say that, like, without enormous effort, these neutral arbiters are probably not going to be so neutral, and they're going to cause some sort of like degenerative effects in the conversation themselves. So the question then, I think, is if we accept that humans are imperfect and that neutral arbiters are very hard to do without a great deal of experience or resources, is it then better to accept the world where there's some misinformation, but maybe we temper the way that people have conversations, or make sure that there are some other checks and balances between people spreading information, or the world where we are blocking information, and maybe blocking that information is leaning slightly to one partisan side or another?
I leave this responsibility, I put a lot of the responsibility to the education system. I don't think we do a good job as educators teaching students and guiding students through the differences of misinformation, disinformation, because there is a difference between the two. And then because of this lack of exposure to how to navigate these things, propaganda then in turn becomes very powerful. Not only to like push political power or just push social power. And with that being said, I think that's like where you got to start. Like there has to be a much more conscious and dedicated effort in exposing students to the differences between misinformation and disinformation. Really exploring what critical thinking actually is. Not only expressing like how do we debunk information, like revealing false and inaccurate information what people say, but also how do we amend those things? So how do we change information for the intent for it to be more accurate and clear? Because while we can say not every single individual is intentionally spewing disinformation, because I think disinformation has like clear intention, like explicitly intended to mislead, but there's very clearly misinformation, like people who in the quest of understanding more about phenomena just get some things that aren't necessarily there, and that's totally fine and we encourage that. But by and large, when we have those pieces of inaccurate information in the quest of finding out more, we don't really do a good job in explaining to people like, okay, like there's misinformation in what you're saying, here's like some ways to approach that, here are ways that you can ask better questions when you're searching for things, better ways of doing research. That way hopefully you can get to a better understanding to the phenomena that you're trying to identify. And then again, if we're talking in photo content, like it's all just going to be used for propaganda at the end of the day. But if it's going to be used as propaganda at the end of the day, then we should be very, very not only keen to, but sensitive to misinformation and disinformation and being able to sniff it out when appropriate.
Baby.
Yeah, so I think okay. I don't want to be this direct this early, but I'm going to do it. So what I'm kind of curious about is like so it seems like, Joe, you're acknowledging that people have some kind of a responsibility for the things they say and the damage that it could do to the world. So I can agree with that. But and misinformation is an easy one, but what about things that like encourage or perpetuate like racial animus toward other like racial groups? For example, the other day when you were on a panel with somebody and out of nowhere called him a white boy, just for no fucking reason.
Ooh.
Right? It had nothing to do with the argument, nothing to do with anything he was saying, but you felt the need to call him a white boy anyway, and on a public stream with hundreds of people.
Okay, see, thank you, dude. This is what my chat was warning me about. Okay.
Sure, I can address that directly.
Do you feel like you have a responsibility for like the racial animus or that could perpetuate?
Of course.
So what should be the consequence for you for doing
the consequence?
Like
so in my consequence, I lost 3 of my mods in that conversation. In that consequence, because I am a public figure and my name is my handle, people contacted my school about that. 2 individuals actually. So I had a meeting with my administration about that. And when I say my administration, I mean my principal, my assistant principal, talked to me directly about that. They're discerned that there's no action moving forward, but to make it very, very clear when I am on stream, that there's a clear difference between who I am as a private individual and who I am when I'm talking about things publicly.
Okay.
That sounds
would you Yeah,
I don't feel like
that sounds fair. Go ahead,
Wait,
Mr.
is that what is your stance on having done that? Do you regret that?
Of course.
It just
Calling
came
people
out.
white in conversations doesn't do anything to push forward the things that I advocate for and what I want to actually talk about. Like, as much as I'm frustrated at the again, like, I'm a Black American, right? So
Yeah.
while I do have frustrations with the systems at be, and I'm also very frustrated at the sort of slow pace that specifically white Americans have when it comes to understanding not only the issues that Black Americans have, but how their particular privileges and their role in these institutions have, that gives me no right in my frustration to racially identify people in a way that leads to them feeling ashamed of themselves for being white, them feeling, I guess you would say, hesitant in even having conversations with me. And it doesn't give me the right, I just, like, that's not productive, right? And as
You
much as
you want to shame white people on a mass scale, but not individually.
that's not what I said. I didn't say,
Kind of. You said you're frustrated with the pace.
I feel like the
pace of white
consequences
people
didn't
and
fit the
understanding.
crime.
So like, and
yeah,
the
I don't know if
issues
I'd agree with like
and the
going
issue,
to your like work and shit like that. That seems like a little far.
Yeah, the
Mine
issue-
thing felt fair.
yeah. So
Yeah,
like
the
to me to like
Oh
to
yeah, I
put
don't
on
think
a
they should go
pin.
to your work. I don't think they should go to your work either.
Address
Sure, to put it-
what Mr. Gross' point was previously, and then the rest of that.
Yeah, like to put it on the pin, and we can kind of move the ball forward. In that, like, I'm frustrated at certain individuals on this platform, but that doesn't give me any right to be antagonistic to them, especially based on their immutable characteristics. That's inconsistent with equity. And it's inconsistent with what I actually stand for. And it doesn't matter how frustrated I am, like, I am still a public individual that has my name literally as my handle. So the way I handle myself is incredibly important. And I lost sight of that.
But that's self-interest. I'm talking about responsibility you have to the audience.
Can you repeat the question one more time, like to the full totality of it?
Doobie asked you about racial animus, and I'm pointing out that in your explanation, you're saying you shouldn't have lashed out at one person, but you're also saying, I'm frustrated with the speed at which white people are understanding the way they participate in society, basically.
No, not directly. My frustration is not how they participate in society. People can participate how they want.
The speed with which they are able to, the speed with which they are gaining an understanding or something.
I can elaborate on that a bit. Like, my frustration comes in that as I'm fighting for the root cause of making sure that students are given the opportunities to be successful in school, the only people that I see in my personal navigation who are going directly against these things have been white Americans predominantly. And what ends up happening, especially in my position, I'm one of 6 Black teachers in my entire district. So when you are trying to fight for something, specifically not only for Black students, but for students of color, trans students, all students of marginalized groups, and then you see a very firm and very aggressive opposition of things that even myself and my other white colleagues argue does not exist within school curriculum, it gets very frustrating. And while the members of marginalized groups, especially within my district, are fighting to make sure that, hey, you know, things like critical race theory are not taught in our school. These books that you believe are pornographic or bring about the idea of promiscuity when it comes to sex, that's just one minute portion of what a book is trying to encapsulate. But then you still get people yelling at school board meetings. You still get people writing letters to administration saying that they want to burn books. So the point I'm trying to make here is that over the past 5 to 6 years, it gets very frustrating when navigating that. Now, again, there's different ways that I can navigate with that. But I think the most important thing that I have to do moving forward is not, no matter how frustrated I am, to not antagonize people like that, because it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable behavior. And I have real world consequences.
I still think, well, you mean for yourself?
No, it's not only for myself.
Bad for the white people who heard you say that?
No, I don't think you're really understanding what I'm saying. is that
I am understanding what you're
don't.
saying. I'm disagreeing with what you're saying.
That's fine, but
Okay.
I have a responsibility not only for myself, but for everyone else around me. Because when I am navigating, I'm not only
Do you think it's
representative of
harmful
myself.
to white viewers to hear you say that?
Of course.
Okay.
I don't think I would say. I don't think I would go that far. I mean, you're allowed to feel that, and it's not like from some equitability of like, oh, you know, like hearing whiteys doesn't affect white people. It's like I just think in general, there is like I feel like harmful requires like just a higher threshold to me. I think it can be seen as maybe rude. It can be seen
racial
as
animus. It is racial
distasteful.
animus.
But I don't know. I feel like I feel like the content. I feel like this is voluntarily bought into content. Like this isn't something that I don't know. I think
I
just think the threshold should be
say whatever
higher.
we want without harm. Like, my point is that Doobie brought up racial animus. I feel like the things you're saying, even right now, you're airing out some kind of racial animus, and I'm not.
Can you elaborate
totally
on that a little bit? Like I'm
Yeah, you're
not
basically
really catching
saying I
what you're
work with a
throwing.
bunch of stupid white people and they suck and they piss me off.
No, I don't work with a bunch of stupid white people. I have
that's what I'm
fantastic colleagues that are not only white but of all demographic. I don't know what you're
Okay.
I don't know what you're trying to get at.
So you're saying okay? Well, you're frustrated with the white people yelling at the school board meetings. White.
I'm
community,
frustrated.
White parents.
I'm frustrated with people in opposition towards marginalized groups when it comes to the goal. When it comes to the goal,
yeah, I don't
trying to make sure that students have
at somebody for being white. I feel like it's the
of course.
same.
I don't know why
his disagreement was political. It wasn't racial. Like it was
my
rooted
disagreement
in
is my disagreement to Ban's point. Like my agreement is specifically political. It has nothing to do with race.
It has nothing to do with race.
There's actually a segment of black people who think that like critical race theory is some like huge thing being taught in elementary school too. It's really a point of like political ignorance.
No,
having the issue with you're making it a black white.
Wait,
issue.
No. You started out saying I yelled at this guy that he was I called him a white boy.
Yes.
And then you're like, instead of doing that, I should give context for why I'm frustrated. And then you said I'm frustrated.
No, I should not give context to why I'm frustrated. I should stay within the bounds of the conversation being discussed. And I should stay in the boundaries of the conversation as it is discussed. And even in my frustration, there's nothing productive in calling somebody a white boy if I'm frustrated at their arguments about something.
That's fine. You just said you're frustrated with white people.
I don't know how you heard
exactly.
that.
I don't know how you heard that. But look, we can. We gotta table this because we're gonna be stuck on.
But that is kind of what you said.
I do think this gets like an interesting question, and that question is like, who is ultimately responsible for creating consequences for harmful speech, right? Because in Joe Lewis's case, it was individuals who brought consequences, who, you know, he lost mods and people like talked to people that were close to him, right? So that's like individuals creating consequences. Do you think it's the responsibility of platforms ever to create consequences for speech, or maybe even the government? So I think we can like sort of focus the question there, like who is responsible? Should platforms create consequences for certain types of speech? Should governments, or should it be left up to the individuals? I think that would be really interesting to get everyone's views on that.
I think there's a responsible way to air out racial grievances, but I don't think the way you're doing it is responsible.
Have you watched any of my content at all?
This is a debate panel. I don't have to watch your content to respond.
Well,
to what you just said.
You're making a claim.
Have you listened to my rap album?
No.
Then you can't respond to anything I say until you've heard my entire rap album. And
that's disingenuous to even posit.
But you're saying he is irresponsible. Like with that, I'm saying.
You're saying the way I navigate in a particular.
Like I have to watch your content to think what you just said is responsible. I don't think that. I think what you just said is irresponsible. I don't think you should be doxxed or attacked at work or anything. I don't think you should be banned. But I do think that, to Doobie's point, you are airing out racial animus and racial grievances, and possibly in a way that emboldens other people to spread or feel those feelings. I think there is a way to air out your frustration with a race of people, if that's what you
I
want
don't
to
think
do.
again, I want to kind of
The way you're
remove the
doing it,
racial point.
I don't think the way you're doing it is responsible.
So
Because
let's
it's political.
remove race from this conversation, because it seems like we're getting caught in that,
I think
right?
that's going to
Like,
be impossible to do because one, Doobie.
Well,
That's the
let's
issue.
try.
That's the
Let's
issue.
try.
That's the point.
Let's
Is you think
try.
it's impossible that
Well,
people
can I just
who have different political
Sure.
positions are like, I don't know.
Can I
It's
just
weird that you're
expand a
saying
little
everyone
bit?
who hold on a second. Just hold on. I think it's weird that he's making, like, you're saying that everyone who holds this political position must obviously be white. Like this is some dog whistle for white people. When like saying that he has an issue with people who are
I'm frustrated
No.
with white people.
no, he specifically said multiple times, and maybe this is you not hearing correctly. He specifically said,
Maybe I'm gonna okay. When I post this on YouTube, I'm gonna post you saying that and then him saying white people. I'm gonna go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
that'd
And
be great. Then do
it
that.
is gonna
Do
be
that
great.
then. But let me finish what I'm saying. Do that, and I'll be owned, and it'll be great. But he specifically said, according to my ears and maybe the rest of the chat's ears, people who had an issue with critical race, the concept of critical race theory being taught in school. And you said, so you mean white people, right? And he said, no.
He said, I'm frustrated with the speed that white people are able to like acknowledge or understand their role in society.
Sure, but when you question him about that, he redirected what he was saying.
Yes,
not
that's
the
what
role in society.
That's what I'm talking about. And so this is so typical of anyone who blurts out like a racial epithet or slur. And then you say, okay, so now we have to talk about how do you feel about white people? And they say, well, or whatever person, whatever group that they attacked, and they say, well, it's complicated. I'm just frustrated. And you're like, oh, you're frustrated with them? And then you say, well, no, I'm not frustrated with them. I'm frustrated with people who don't like critical race theory and people who want to burn books that have sex in them or whatever.
Yeah,
and
I
then
think you can clarify things.
But it's not a clarification. It's an obfuscation.
I
I believe that if you blurt out a racial slur, or if you blurt out a racial attack, that I believe that you do harbor anger or animus towards that race of people. And if, when questioned about it, you have some long, convoluted explanation, you're just hiding it.
I think that do you deal with human beings who speak colloquially? Like, do have generalizations? Like, I do. Like, I don't know. I think there's people say like, "Oh my goodness, women get on my nerves," and then like, so there's not a single woman on this planet that you like, and then it's like, well, no, actually more particular, and you speak on some particular thing. And
okay, I can be racist against black people, but still like some black people. That doesn't mean that you don't like any of them. And if you can be misogynistic but still like some women, that's not fair.
But I'm saying that if some people use speech like more colloquially, like I don't think you should take
overgeneralize.
Yeah, overgeneralize. Yeah,
you're saying that when Joe Louis called that person a white boy, Joe Louis does not harbor any resentment for white people.
Joe, I apologize. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying whenever he made the generalization of white people and you asked for clarification on what he meant there, and then he went more specific, but you just seemed like you didn't accept that clarification.
It's different. It's saying.
You consider his clarification obfuscating. That's what you said, correct?
It's not a clarification, and whether it's true or not, it's not more specific. He didn't say white people who are anti-CRT. He said people who are anti-CRT, and then you gave him a lifeline by saying that could even include black people, and he was like,
"It does."
Yeah.
That's not a lifeline. It's like, is that true?
That's not a more specific group. That's a different group.
Okay.
So
the propaganda. Hang on. This is actually good to tie back into what we're saying, because the propaganda within these opposition groups is the same, right? And like, if I talk about propaganda as information being used to promote a particular political cause or perspective, there's a very clear political cause and perspective within the propaganda that exists in counter narrative to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, culturally responsive teaching, and culturally responsive training. The problem here is with that information and with this counter information, there's still, I would argue, disinformation. So false and inaccurate information explicitly designed to mislead people. For example, one of the things that's posited in an overwhelming majority of the anti-CRT bills that are getting pushed in the United States are all these ideas in terms of white animus and white anxiety. And by and large, most people who are in support of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and in support of culturally responsive teaching and training, they don't approach that because that's part of what they advocate for within that nobody should feel any type of animosity because of their immutable characteristics, specifically and especially skin tone. But then what happens is you get one part of the thing, one part of the phenomena, I should say, correct. But then when it comes to the additional information, they start positing things like they start misrepresenting a singular lesson plan or a singular instance in a classroom and say that like this is because of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is because of culturally responsive teaching. But by and large, for a lot of these diversity, equity initiatives, a lot of the reports, and again, like when I'm saying reports, there are directors and different types of administration who do analysis of the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and then make different types of just analysis of the circumstances that are going on within the school. And one of the things that's shown time and time again is that particularly equity initiatives are not at a system-wide level. So what happens is you do get these individual instances of teachers doing culturally irresponsible teaching, like the one math teacher who did that weird like indigenous chant thing in the middle of math class. When like if you had a like a proper not only reinforcement but consistent not only I want to say education, but it is professional development on equity and how you can apply it within your teaching, then you won't have situations where teachers will think that that's okay. But people in opposition of what they're going to call CRT, but I understand it as diversity, equity, and inclusion and culturally responsive teaching, you're never going to get to that point where it's like, well, actually, within the school system, there was no diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. There was no equity officer. This is just a teacher functioning on their own accord. But that information is counter to what they're trying to push. They're trying to push that because of these things, this is happening. When in reality, sometimes in a lot of these schools, they don't have the resources to even have culture responsive teaching in their professional development, unless it's maybe one singular class, maybe like 30 minutes out of.
Understand what
I
you're
think the
saying.
problem, Joe Lewis, is that like
Sure.
even if ostensibly in diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, it says that no one should be alienated, the actual result is that people are alienated. And that's most often white people who
in terms, do you mean in terms of
can see that like
so,
when
not to
these
cut,
affirmative action policies are put in place, like SAT scores, you know, being
sure,
white
but
has like no
affirmative
benefit,
to cut
but like
you to cut
being
you off
Asian
to
is
cut you
actually
off.
going to decrease your chance of getting in college, even if you've
Sure.
got like a good SAT score, or language that like frames white people as colonizers. It's all
Sure.
good, well and good to say that like, well, people shouldn't feel alienated because that's what the system is. But like fundamentally, these belief systems are the kind of belief systems that pit different racial groups as classes. You know, you read some of this old CRT literature, things by like Kimberly Crenshaw, and it's talking about Black people and white people as classes of people. And that kind of viewing of race, where white people have a class interest to oppress Black people, is the kind of thing that's going to make people feel alienated. And it doesn't matter if like ostensibly that's not the goal, because that's what happens.
Do you think there's a difference between
April,
descriptive
hang on,
and prescriptive
April, can
language?
April, real quick, can you hear me? Like check 1 2. Do I need to turn my mic up?
I can hear you. Yeah. I
Okay,
just had
perfect.
to, you know.
Yeah, you had a point. I just want to make
to interrupt my.
Sure, I didn't. Yeah, I was okay. Yeah, so I want to make it clear. So you can hear me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great, absolutely fantastic.
Can you hear
so
me?
one of the yes, I can.
Okay, good.
So one of the
You started
things.
talking when I was speaking, anyways.
Correct. We can move past that. So one of the things that I found interesting in your statement is that even within your qualms and frustrations, it felt like there was conflation between affirmative action versus CRT versus equity initiatives, and those three things are separate from each other, especially when they're applied in public schools. So I guess my question for you is, what exactly is your issue with equity initiatives in particular?
Oh, okay. So personally, I have a very big problem with equity initiatives in school, for example. And the reason is I think that policy should never take as one of its meaningful factors like skin color, right? Okay, let me elaborate. Basically, I think people should be chosen for their skills, not for their skin color. And I think as soon as you start eroding the meritocracy that we have in schools. That's a very dangerous road for society as a whole, but especially these institutions, which
You're
are premised
against
on an
affirmative
understanding
action?
of meritocracy.
I
in
think
the,
that I think that
affirmative action
colorblind, like
label?
overall, like even though
I want to
just,
before you do that, I do want to get that answer. Are you against affirmative action, April?
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
I can see that. So I guess the question is, within your quest of moving to like a meritocracy framework, what do you do with students with IEPs and different types of special accommodations? Do you think that schools ought not to do that?
IEPs? What do you mean?
Individual education programs.
Oh, okay. So can you give an example of that?
Sure. Certain, let's say you have a learning deficit that has an ADP, like me, which is an APD, excuse me, which is an auditory processing disorder.
Black is not a learning deficit.
Yeah, I'm not.
Having an auditory processing disorder is a learning deficit.
Yes,
so
but being
one
black
of the
is not. So
who was, I'm pretty sure Joe's addressing a different point right now.
Obviously fine with affirmative action for people who have disabilities. That's not.
He didn't say that. That's weird that you would assume.
Yeah, I didn't.
It's because it's fucking obvious. Okay, are you?
I mean,
okay.
I do think that accommodations should be made for anyone.
Right. So the thing,
she's against affirmative action. We all know what that means. I don't understand. Why do you have to ask her specifically if she's against affirmative action for like blind and deaf people? Like,
I'm not talking about affirmative action for. Again, we're getting things kind of complicated, and like I don't know where to start to tackle it
at all.
Sure. So let me try this a different way, April. Do you believe that schools should ensure the fair treatment, equality of opportunity, and equality of access to information and resources in schools?
Absolutely. And the key word here is equality. Everyone should have access to
Gotcha. That's so the thing that confuses me is definitionally how my district defines equity. So what within that, if you do have an issue with equity, like what's your problem within that you have concerns for?
Yeah, so my problem is that when the criteria for entering someone into a program becomes anything other than their actual capability to do the work, we are eroding the meritocracy. And so it's not good to set as one of your reasons for including people or not including people skin color, right? Everyone should be given a chance based on their ability. And I think when we look at like schooling, a good policy would be to provide scholarships to any intelligent student who can prove need. And if you do that, it's going to disproportionately benefit Black kids. That's awesome, right? Because we want every kid who's intelligent and capable of really succeeding in college to have the opportunity to do so. We want that. And that kind of policy is great. What's not a good policy is to set a quota and say, we need to have this proportional representation of these skin colors. Because the end result of that is you're going to be searching for BIPOC candidates to put into your program, even if they're not going to be totally qualified.
I think that's a great argument, but do you guys not know the counter arguments to affirmative action? I feel like we all should already know all of the points on both sides here. Like, I feel like we can just like, okay, Doobie, what?
So just a quick, totally unrelated thing. While you guys were arguing with each other, my girlfriend came into the room, leaned over as if she was going to kiss me, and then tried to force chewed chicken into my mouth like a bird. And I feel more violated than I've ever felt in my entire life. It was absolutely, okay, but back on topic. I feel like we've kind of gone off the rails here because what we were meant to be talking about is what Joe said and the consequences. Now, where we can talk about affirmative action and all that kind of stuff. I feel like that's a huge rabbit hole that we can get into if you guys really, really want to. But
I don't think we need to. Don't we all know everybody's positions on affirmative action? Like it's all very obvious.
But what's more interesting to
We're not
me
talking
is
to just each other.
if so Joe has expressed that he thinks this is a bad thing to do, right? When he did that, and the reason it was so like relevant to me is I think that either the day before or the day after I was on here with Prime, and we spoke to this guy Mio who's like a white nationalist dude, right? And the kind of stuff that Joe did, right? This kind of like casual racism toward a white person on a public platform, totally, I guess, accepted apparently within the group, and that was kind of how something that he used to fuel his argument. Like, hey, it's okay to be racist to white people these days. White people are going to be oppressed. Little Timmy's going to be called white boy, and he's going to be treated like shit for being white, and yada yada, right? And Joe was doing that thing, right, on this platform, right? And Joe, so I acknowledge that you said it was a bad thing to do. And I don't agree with people going after your job or anything like that. I think that's really fucked up. But I wonder if you can commit here to not doing that sort of thing again, not essentializing somebody or going after somebody with some kind of like racial insult, bringing up the race for some reason.
Of course, my commitment moving forward, to make sure it's very, very clear, is that I want better outcomes for students in public schools. And I want to
That's
have
not what he's talking about.
better...
Stop it. Stop. You have to
I'm
stop.
trying to say the full encapsulation of what I want to do moving forward.
Can you not?
And if you
can
have
you say the non-full encapsulation?
But you didn't ask the question. Just let him answer the question. Didn't know he wants to be
answered. He's not going to answer it. He's not going to answer it. I don't want.
Then I'll call him out if he doesn't. But just let him answer it.
Okay. So let's rewind then. Let's rewind then. Doobie, can you answer your question again?
Or could you ask a question?
So given that we know that that what you did is kind of a negative thing that the white nationalists use to fuel their white nationalism and to pull other people into white nationalism, right?
And it's wrong on its own.
And it's wrong on its own, right?
We promise not to be mean
unless it's funny. And it's okay, I'm joking. And it's wrong on its own. Right? Can you commit here to not doing that again, right? To not attacking somebody for their race or bringing up their race when it's totally irrelevant to the conversation?
Yes.
Okay. Can I ask a question?
Can I elaborate on my goal now?
Elaborate your goal. I do have a question that's based on this, but like kind of moves us in a slightly different direction.
Sure. So what I try to do in my space is prioritize educational politics. And with that is going to come different types of difficult conversations on how we can do better by students. Very clearly, and it seems to be Mr. Girl's frustration, and you've seen that this frustration too, that I have an anti-white bias, which I'll admit that I do.
No.
I'll go as far as say, can I finish? May I finish my point?
Please.
Okay, sure, but you're misrepresenting me.
Go, Lewis.
That's fine. We can move on from here because we're probably at the table moving forward. That being said, I need to make sure that the content that I put out publicly and what I want to do is consistent with that goal. And going after people based on their immutable characteristics is not that. So that's all I got from that.
Okay. This idea of going after someone's job, right? I think you've all since agreed that that was uncalled for in Joe's situation. But at the same time, we see this when a Karen strikes, right? We see people cheer for exactly that. What's the difference between these situations? If you've ever cheered for a Karen, then why not here as well? Not that I want Joe. Joe's a fantastic human being. I want him to keep his job. He's a great teacher. So put that out there. Like, that's my base right there. But I don't know what the difference is here. If you think this is actually, I think, a racial animus, I'm less convinced of that myself right here. But if you believe that is the case, then why isn't this called for?
I mean, I guess you'll have to speak to other people, but I've never thought the concept of like going after a private citizen's like workplace when their work is also like a private sector type thing. I don't know. That's always been really cringe to me. Now, the only time I never really cheer for it because I gain nothing from someone else being harmed. Like, I don't even believe in like a punitive justice model, in like just generally. But like maybe if you are like in a place of like public speaking, like if not even a Joe Rogan, like a Tucker Carlson or something, and someone like holding you accountable for what you do in that official capacity, then that's probably more appropriate. But yeah, I never cheer for people going for the Karens. That's cringy to me.
Yeah, I don't. The idea that every black person who has racial animus towards white people just shouldn't have a job is a very weird idea. Like, that would definitely make things worse for black people and for everybody in general. Like, that's not a good plan, and it will just increase racial animus anyway. So to me, that makes no sense. I don't get the idea of like, if somebody said something bad, that they shouldn't have their current job. Like, should they never have another job? Like, I don't think that makes sense.
So
It's absurd. And the best way to like fix that is to talk with them and like empathize and
Yeah,
try
exactly.
Oh, okay. So are you sure that's true across the board? There was just an incident that happened in New York, I think, right? I don't know sports, but I think these were Knicks fans. And they were on a train, and they saw, like, it seemed like a mixed race family, from what my understanding is. They were telling them, like, get the hell out of here. You don't belong in our country. Like, they're trying to take it over. One guy threw his beer at them, right? And they lost their jobs at, I believe it was a Toyota dealership or something like that. And so, like, they assaulted.
Like, I understand from a money perspective. I get why Toyota is like, I don't want you to work here because you're just hurting business. That makes sense. But I'm just saying, from a justice perspective, I don't like. There's not really a reason why a racist person or a violent person or a crazy person can't work at like Toyota unless they're doing this.
Is that true? Is that true? Well, first of all, absolutely. I mean, there's a reason why they can't work at McDonald's, because they're working in food service. What do they do to the food of people who they don't like, right? Like, you don't know. So that's one thing, right? Moving on, there is, when it comes to teaching, okay, so again, I'm not talking about my man Joe. My man Joe is actually quite amazing. But there was this woman in Florida, and she had a lot of racial animus. She was white. And she apparently had a like a podcast, like a Nazi podcast. She was telling about like how she's like a kindergarten teacher, and she actively discourages black children, like 5-year-olds, right, like black and brown children, right, to make them feel worse about themselves, and then like tries to encourage the white students as any chance to get, right? Should a person like that not lose their job?
Well, I think that's in direct relationship with their like job. I think they're failing at the job.
Do you think any white nationalists, whether they admit it or not, like would not do something similar? She just simply stated exactly what she was doing. But if there was a someone who is has displayed extreme racial animus, right? Do you think they would not still do the exact same thing as a black person, right? Going through the education system with experience, I've experienced racist teachers, right? Lots of black individuals, you talk to them, right? You experience straight up racist teachers. So those people have had their jobs.
Well, I don't understand why do you think that a white teacher who blurts out something equivalent to what Joe Lewis said should teach black kids?
So no, I'm moving things on. So I'm trying to move it along.
Yeah, I know, but you're moving things on because Joe Lewis is black. But if he were white,
no. I feel like we addressed it. I think it was
Mr. Go. That's not what I'm saying, Mr. Go. Mr. Go, hold on, Mr. Go. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying I'm moving it along to a more extreme example. Not that I'm like hiding from Joe Lewis's I'm talking about, like, if you're saying that no one should ever, if no one should ever lose their job under any circumstances, I'm trying to test that. What is your limits here?
No, I didn't say no one should lose their job under any circumstances. But the example you just gave of a white teacher being more encouraging to white students, if I were the principal at Joe's school and I heard about this, I would probably want to talk to him too. I wouldn't try to fire him, but I would be like, how are you managing your obvious racial animus towards white people? How are you managing that in the classroom? Is this coming out in your work?
I think that's a really fair. I think it's a really fair question because I can agree that if it you just actually clued me into this, right? Because if it had been a white dude saying, calling someone black boy on here, I wouldn't want them teaching at a school, right, to children, to black children, because I'd assume, I think somewhat justifiably, that they're not going to be treating these children very well. So I think that's a really interesting thing to bring up, Mr. Girl.
I don't know. I think this is a super reach, and to the problem, I'm not saying no one should ever be fired, but there is a substantial difference between saying something like, I'm not against public shaming. I'm not against you do something bad, like publicly people see you in a negative light and don't want to be associated with you. But I think the concept of like actively seeking out someone's workplace, like to cause them like financial and physical harm, like I think that's the dangerous part. If your business, like if something blows up and your job happens to find out and it's like negative publicity against them and they don't feel comfortable having you in that position, that's a different thing. That's not saying that like people shouldn't be fired.
No.
I just think that the idea of like this social media justice response to people you think are doing harm, of like, let's call their job, let's take their children, let's ruin their life, I think that kind of is cringy.
I think the key word here is extreme racial animus, because I think a lot of people have some sort of racial animus. And like, I talk to people, like my girlfriend, she's Mexican, and she, I think, has like some racial animus towards white people based just on like her experiences. And she knows there's like a heuristic in her brain where if someone's going to be racist to her, it's probably going to be a white person. But do I think that like precludes her from, you know, ever being in a job because she has like some racial animus? No, probably not. And I think the difference is like the extreme versus like mild. And I think what like Joe Lewis said, saying like white boy, frankly, that doesn't seem like extreme racial animus to me. And I think it's a little bit different than like calling someone black boy, because like that is a charged term. And like calling black people like boy is something that you see like with racists. So
I think they're both pretty charged terms. Like,
but like one is obviously much more charged because it is a different.
Well, one has like more history behind it, right? But they're still
we're creating the history for white boy being offensive now.
April,
I have a couple observations I want to make real quick. One, I think liberals have a problem where they're like, everyone is racist. We all have to own our racism. But if you reveal your racism to anyone for any reason, you lose your job and you're publicly shamed. I think if we really believe, as April said, that most people have some kind of racial animus, then I don't think you should be punished too much for revealing it. I think it should be more about how are you going to manage it in your life and how are you going to still do a good job at your job, even if you carry that view. And then the other thing is, I think most racial animus is defensive. Most racist people feel that they are being, like you said about your girlfriend, feel like they're under attack from the race that they are racist towards, including white people. And so, yeah.
I feel like you're just saying words right now. That felt very.
Well, I don't think white people are the most racist race.
April, you brought up something that I kind of want to address. You mentioned that your partner was Mexican. You said I totally missed that.
Mestizo.
Gotcha. And you said that you believe that, or maybe you said she expressed it. I didn't catch either or, that she has certain responses towards white people in her life. And you mentioned like her past experience with white people.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. So what do you believe to be a way to alleviate the circumstances that would lead to her having those type of animosities towards white people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting question because like a lot of white people get very frustrated when they interact with people of color who are maybe not like the warmest to them. And I think this especially happens like with racial discussions, where if I'm talking about race and I have like more conservative views, I think it's like a normal heuristic for people to recognize that if a Black person has like more conservative views, they're less likely to be actively racist than a white person who's expressing sort of conservative views and is maybe like hiding their power level. So I think this like sort of cautiousness is pretty legitimate. But the best thing that you can do in that situation is really try to hold open a space of empathy for why someone might have those feelings or that frustration or that mild animus. And then also try to really go the extra mile to make them feel comfortable. So like, you know, if I were to just meet my girlfriend like on the street and we were to have a conversation about race, I think the appropriate response for me, even though like it's extra effort, is to just hold open like extra space and understanding for why she might be uncomfortable and try to meet her where she's at.
Okay. And then I guess as a follow-up to that question, because that was a good perspective. Thank you for that. What are ways that you believe a Mexican student could feel what you're describing specifically within the education system? What are some ways that you think a school district could do something like that?
Like
in terms of holding
hold open
space,
space?
in terms of
Oh, okay.
accommodation, stuff like that.
I'm not sure. I think you would probably have a much better answer on this than I would. But maybe like you'll say something and I can key off of it. What do you think is like a good way to hold space for this kind of anxiety?
Well, I think everything that you described. The reason why I asked you the question in particular is because something that tends to happen, especially with those who are looking towards meritocracy, especially within public schools, is that when we start talking about accommodations and holding space for people of marginalized groups, in this case, we're talking about a Mexican student, there tends to be a conflict in interest within keeping sort of meritocracy, like I guess you would say meritocracy frameworks, but also keeping space for those types of individuals, whether it be Mexican or otherwise. For example, I guess one thing that I think school districts should try to do is to ask the question, are we approaching our hiring in a way that is actually reflective of our student body? And this has nothing to do with affirmative action, by the way. And that's a totally separate thing. I want to make sure this is clear. And that there's a difference between saying that we need, say, 15% of our student population, our teacher population to be Mexican, versus within our district, there are, we'll say, our district makes up, we'll say, 47%, we'll say Mexican for this example. And does that 47% feel represented not only within the student body, but also within the administration body as well?
I feel like advocating for race quotas in hiring is the exact opposite way to deal with like racial animus.
Yeah.
And I agree. It's not a race quota. I'm talking specifically about. I'm talking. No, I can elaborate for sure. It's like, are we asking the question?
But either way, I feel like we're deep down that rabbit hole I mentioned earlier again, right?
Yeah, I cannot understand what you're saying.
Right, I'm talking to April specifically about this.
I mean, if I can respond
if we can, yeah. Unless we want to just move on from that, I'm cool with that.
I can't follow.
I mean, you're reminding me of something interesting, right? And
sure.
It's this tension between holding space for ideas and, you know, putting all ideas on equal footing versus holding people to like higher standards. So there's this term that I've heard thrown around called epistemological equity. Epistemology is just the study of truth and how do we come to believe and justify our beliefs. And equity, like we've talked about, is this idea that like all things need to be raised to an equal playing field. But the fundamental reality is that there are some epistemological worldviews that are less effective in a university setting. So if you adopt the epistemological worldview of scientific rationalism, of hypothesis and questioning your data and trying to like disprove your initial biases, that's something that's going to really benefit you. Versus the epistemological, I'll get to you in 1 second. Yeah.
Well, I just want to So I totally understand every single word coming out of your mouth right now. I understand every concept, everything, right? But for the people in chat, right, the the simple
And me,
folk,
I don't know what the fuck you guys are talking about.
can you maybe like bring it down out of the ivory tower a little bit and down to the common
tone
man's
it
perspective,
down, people.
right?
Okay,
And maybe
less fancy words.
thank you.
Fucking
You're right.
Christ.
I do tend to speak in incredibly pretentious ways.
This is why they should ban philosophy. Yeah.
What I basically mean is that, like, sometimes belief systems are worse than other belief systems, okay? And you should hold space for people to feel included, but you shouldn't hold so much space. You enable belief systems that are negative and detrimental to society. So people should feel welcome, but if someone requires that everyone buy into their epistemological, into their worldview in order to feel welcome, then that's going to be a step too far. So I think there's like a tension here, and we can find it.
I think this is something that's really easy to say, but it's a way harder to implement. Like obviously, like if I if we were just saying things, I would say that like only good ideas should be had as part of society. But like, how do we define that? How do we implement it? Like to me, that if we can't implement it, it feels close to useless. Now, I'm not saying what you're saying is useless because I generally agree with it, but I don't think we would ever be able to socially define and like hold accountable what we consider to be the right types of ideas.
I mean, I think the key thing here is that as long as we agree that not all ideas are equal and that everyone should just be like included to the point where it's destructive, I think we're on the same page, right? Where inclusion is not like the only metric, but also we want to progress society in other ways. So
that's why I started with like being socially unpopular, even though like I understand the like the larger implications of like saying that like the right position can be like socially unpopular. There's a lot of things that are probably good for society. They're right now socially unpopular, but it seems to be all we have is something so demonstrably like if something is like economically harmful, that these especially like relating to like COVID or a lot of these other things going on, like businesses are saying that like this type of negative speech, even though they can't necessarily control all of it, a lot of it is being like blocked and censored, and that's what like conservatives have an issue with right now. And I feel like it's probably the most useful way of doing things.
I'm gonna freak out. I'm in the fucking Twilight Zone. We're not talking about the topic. This is not about the question, right?
Well, I was addressing what you said because I haven't been able to address anything else.
You're way down that rabbit hole too, where everybody's using $10 words.
I don't think I said
but we're not even talking. We're not even talking about the topic that we're supposed to be talking about. I don't know what
I'd like to address April directly.
I do want to move on. because we have been drifting. I've been trying to.
Prime.
Yeah, let's please move on. Let's go ahead. All right, Doobie, give it a try.
I have so Mr. Girl. This is for you.
Yes, dear.
So I have something similar to what I have for Joe for you.
Okay.
So you were on, I think you were on Wiki Supreme stream. Or you might have been on Lauren Southern's. One of those two, right? And I was watching, and it might have been Wiki Supreme actually. It was one where you said that you would rather watch the world burn than not say what you want to say, right? Something to that effect.
Yeah.
And that seemed, and because of what you were talking about at the time was the potential that you normalizing conversations about child attraction, right? Not molesting children, to be clear, but just that sometimes some adults are going to find some young girls attractive, right?
Really?
And kind of, yeah. I mean, if you weren't trying to, if you weren't suggesting that, correct me, but that's what I got from it, right? So that we should normalize that conversation, right? And talk about what I think you said that it was natural, right, for some guys to look at some young girls and just to feel attracted to them, right?
I believe that
even
I
if it's
said that.
if it's an immoral thing, right, for them to act on those intentions.
Obviously, there would be a moral to act on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've watched like a bunch of your YouTube content, and I found a video that was, I think, from earlier I guess mid last year. It was about like a monster you've been running from or fighting your whole life, right?
Yeah.
And then you kind of went into your background a little bit, and you talked about your stepmother, and about how you felt like you had to like tiptoe around everything you said, because everything you said was kind of used against you and weaponized in some way, because it seems like she was some like hyper SJW type, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you talked about
She's a man-hating lesbian.
yeah. So I think one of the things you used was like you said that muscles were gross, and then she like came into your room and was like, oh, you guys know that muscles are are like
Yeah. So
the
my
guys say the
brother and I
muscles taste like
we were
vaginas and shit.
we made a joke about how we were eating like a large amount of smoked mussels, like
Yeah.
in oil, on crackers, and we were joking about how like gross it was to eat like an entire container of mussels, but we like couldn't stop because they were really good. And then yeah, my stepmother followed me up to my room. I was probably like 13, and yelled at me because she was like, you know that people compare muscles to vaginas, so you're saying muscles are gross because you think vaginas are gross. And I was like, I've never heard this. I don't know what you're talking about. I, I, I don't want to talk about vaginas with you. I was not trying to talk about vaginas. Like, you're crazy, super oversensitive and insane. Yes, that was the story. Continue.
Is this
Yes.
still closer to the topic?
And then yes, yeah, I'll get there.
He's gonna
Be
bring it
patient.
home. It's Doobie, okay? Yeah.
Okay, I always get home. Okay, don't worry about it. So then he started talking about some of the stuff you used to do in school, right? You used to like write like articles or little newsletters.
Yeah, I had a news. I would
right?
hand out my
They're very
newsletter
edgy,
once,
funny,
Very
extremely funny for your age. Actually, for anyone's age, they're very funny. Like the one about the pedophile principal, really funny work.
Thank you. Thank you.
But and he started talking about how you'd get in trouble for that, right? And you getting in trouble for that, right? When you knew, where you felt like a lot of people in the school actually agreed with you. A lot of the teachers agreed with you, right? Even though other teachers were coming to you as if it was like some outlandish thing you were saying, a lot of them actually agreed with you, but they weren't saying it because they were like they were worried about the mob, right? This monster that would come after them if they said the wrong thing, right?
Yes. Yeah, there was a letter that was circulated saying I was racist and anti-Semitic and homophobic. And I think 50 teachers signed it. And I complained to one of my teachers like that. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. And she was like, well, think of it this way. 100 teachers didn't sign it. I was like, well, that's not that, like, thanks for going to bat for me. Yeah, you didn't sign the letter saying I was racist. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And what I think what you were talking about was the monster was the fear that the fear of other people's disapproval, basically, right? So you say the wrong thing, and other people are gonna disapprove, and they're gonna shame you, and nobody else is gonna speak out for you because they don't want to get shamed too, even if it's a majority opinion, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of that perspective, right? This idea that because when I first heard you say that thing about letting the world burn, rather than like not saying anything you want to say, it sounded extremely irresponsible to me, right? Given the topic, right? And I wonder like how, and I still think that perspective when you're talking about that issue is irresponsible. I think you probably should look into whether or not normalizing that kind of attraction, or at least discussion about that kind of attraction, could lead to like child molestation.
That's
I think
okay. Can I push back
go
on
for
that
it.
very briefly? I'm not saying we should normalize an attraction to children. I'm saying we should normalize talking about things about ourselves or each other that are bad. So, for example, in this conversation, it'd be normalizing talking about racial animus. Being able to openly admit, yeah, I kind of hate white people, or I have problems with black people, or like April's girlfriend. I'm mistrustful of white people. Those feelings, I don't think talking about them normalizes them, and I don't think it even helps them spread. It might help make them safer. And so it would be the same thing with being attracted to children or teenagers or whatever. Any sexual feeling that you're having, I think if you can talk about it with yourself or with your loved ones or friends or a therapist or whoever, it gives you a better chance at loving yourself and at kind of controlling it and knowing like, how's this going to work in my life?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's more like so if we're talking about monsters, it would be like this thing is the monster in the back of everybody's mind, and they're just not talking about it, so it's allowed to fester and build, and it comes out sometimes, and then we hide it away again, we pretend it's not there. It's like it's that sort of thing, right? So you want us to acknowledge that this thing exists inside of us sometimes, or at least in some of us. And we should acknowledge that and work together to like like get rid of it or to deal with it.
Yeah, yeah,
Is
yeah.
that
But
what it
to
is?
kind of steel man what you're saying, I think the movie Cuties would be a good example of something that actually could create more sexual feelings towards children just by making it and distributing it.
Right.
More than just a conversation would, like art or like a book like Lolita. Like if you're writing about sexual attraction to children in a way that's kind of salacious, then I think you get more to the question of, do I want to burn Lolita, or am I going to prioritize free speech while knowing that I might be making the world a worse place, even for children?
Where do
Is
you
that what you're
come
getting
down
at?
on that? What do you think is what you prioritize?
I prioritize free speech. I come down on it right where the Constitution comes down on it. I don't think you should make child porn, and I don't think you should be able to watch child porn, but I think you should be able to write a book about whatever you want, and I think you should be able to draw whatever you want, or think about whatever you want,
What do you
fantasize about
think the
whatever you want,
distinction
Without
is there?
consequences?
Is it just like the
without
actual
consequence.
children being hurt?
Wait, sorry, April.
What is the distinction between producing child porn or writing it or, drawing it?
Well,
Is it
child
just
porn
like the
involves
child?
you have to hurt a child to make
Okay,
child porn.
yeah.
But if you're writing it, no, I think you should. With writing, absolutely, you should be able to write whatever you want. I mean, as whatever fucked up shit you want to express, you should be able to write it. But you are putting those thoughts out there, and then somebody might read it and be like, "Oh, this just turns me on," and maybe it's not just awakening something. Maybe it really is putting a new idea or a new feeling into that
Right.
person.
I don't. I'm about to say,
But
without even
but
going
even
more
if
specific into this, like, do you think that? Do you mean when you say do whatever you want? Do you mean without social consequences? Like
I
so,
mean,
or
without
I don't even
legal.
like
No, no,
consequences,
no, no. Without
repercussions.
I don't think anybody's talking like
without.
social consequences.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, without legal consequences for sure. In my ideal world, if I am writing like super graphic erotica involving minors, and then I'm also like a little league coach, would there be no social repercussions? I like if they find out about. I would want basically the same thing that happened to Joe. Like basically, I think you should talk to the person and find out how if this is affecting your work, and then if it is, then they can't do that work. I think if somebody, I would draw the line if somebody's like literally a pedophile and they're like, I am in love with children and I want to marry a child and they should be able to consent and blah blah blah. That person probably shouldn't work with children.
I don't know.
For
I
sure.
think that people have some
If
level,
someone's in
like
the
I think
KKK,
even people who
they
say who do good speech have have an understanding of like the repercussions of what they do. Even if you're like even like black radicals, like the Black Panther, like when people take these steps to step into things that are considered controversial, like
Yeah.
or in activists, like in activist field, like I feel like there's some level of knowing what you're getting into. I think those consequences shouldn't, like I said, I don't think people should come for your job or like try to attack your family or anything like that. But I think socially, if you want to make if you're going to make a stance as a part of society, good or bad, like
Yeah.
you have to be ready for the social repercussions.
Yeah, I
that
don't
come
think.
with
Yeah,
it.
but I think we all kind of understand that. But I'm wondering. So the reason this kind of stuck out to me is because I've had that argument with people 1,000 times, right, about what I allow in my community, right? I allow people to make lots of really scary arguments, right? um, and I wonder, like, but on that topic specifically, for me, that's like there's a line there, right? That I've drawn a box around this topic, and if I feel like it can normalize this thing, I'm not interested in having the debate, right? But I
we don't have
wonder,
that.
like,
So in my Discord, you're not allowed to sexualize children, but
right,
that's because it will get the Discord deleted, not
right,
because
yeah,
I don't think you should be allowed to talk about it. It's just that it's like a business, and it's like the Discord's like it's like my restaurant that I own. I'm like you can't talk about it in my restaurant. You can talk about it in the fucking parking lot, but like I don't. Yeah. When I say sexualized children, I mean don't like we've had like pedophiles come in who want to talk about pedophilia or want to do like an AMA or something like that. And that's like, if you keep it super clinical and vague, fine. But as soon as you start getting into details, no.
I know Doobie kind of started it. Is this who you want to be? Like, and I'm saying no like personal positions about you, but like, do you want to be the pedo guy? Is that like the thing that? Because I know you didn't
Wait,
necessarily
no, I
bring
don't
up the
think that's
topic.
fair to. I don't think it's fair to ask. Even. I don't
Well,
think
no,
anybody. I
but
don't think anything he's done is like.
but that's. I'm not saying it in a negative sense. I'm saying does he want that to be his niche? Does he like does he want all of his in-depth discussions to be surrounded around that topic? Like I'm not gonna say if that's good or bad. I'm just saying is that something that is like, yeah, this is what I want to be known for. Because people do have niches.
Wait, are you asking me? Or are you asking?
No, I'm asking Mr. Girl. Because it seems like every topic around you comes to that.
It always comes back to that. No, I want to be the empathy guy.
Okay, I don't know. It was just weird. I was wondering how we got here, and I was like, "This is." It was like,
Doobie made me do it.
Yeah, Doobie.
I'm the empathy guy, and we empathize with pedophiles the least, and so that's part of why I think I keep coming back to it.
Okay.
Yeah. So just to kind of expand this, like what I was getting at. So for me, like I said, there's like a box around that topic, right? Where I'm not interested in engaging in arguments with people, even like steel manning them, where I feel like it could lead to like child molestation, shit like that, but it doesn't seem like there is for you, and I wonder how far that goes. So like if they're like I think like up to 5% of the men in the United States are pedophiles. Right, according to like whatever fucking studies they have to come up with that number. So there's millions of people in this country, millions of guys specifically who are pedophiles. So if a writer did want to like start making erotica, like literotica, right, for pedophiles, they could probably find a market and make a good living doing that, right? Specifically writing books that like sexual.
They have and they do.
Yeah, and but you wouldn't say that's something that should be banned, or you would allow them to do it? Because it's
absolutely because you have to draw a line somewhere. You're never going to perfectly be able to draw a line that gives us all the freedom we want and all the safety we need. And so you have to decide, do you want to err on the side of being safe, which means shutting down some ideas and some speech and some self-expression, or some of those things which may not even be harmful at all, or do you want to err on the other side of, you be you express yourself, you make your art, you make your writing, do whatever you want, and we're gonna clean up the mess after. And I firmly believe that to be America, and part of why we are the way we are, and when I say that I mean the good things about America, is because we err on the side of freedom.
But again, I feel like that begins and ends at the free speech. I mean, that begins and ends at the government. Like we pass that. There's all types of ways where we limit people, and I think that's the more interesting conversation. The Constitution.
Well, I think he's asking more on a philosophical level. Like, do I personally? So I'm aligning it with the
First Amendment. If something can be demonstrated to do harm
people,
right? Would you still allow it just because you so firmly believe in this principle? And I think your answer is yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, no, I mean, clearly there is a line, right? And he illustrated that line earlier when he said that, like, the production of porn involving minors. Like,
but he's just talking about the ideas. He's saying, would I, knowing it's going to cause other people to do bad things, to commit crimes and break laws, do I have some kind of responsibility for putting those ideas in their heads or normalizing them somehow? Intentionally or not intentionally? I would say no. I think we need to keep speech and art as unburdened by the moral consequences as we can. At the same time, I think a lot about the moral consequences of my speech, and so it's really important to me that I don't cause harm in that way. But if you're asking me to choose, obviously, I want to have my cake and eat it too. But if I had to choose between freedom and whatever the fucking other thing is, I would choose freedom.
But we've established there's a line, and the line seems to be the production of harm, or the creation of harm in the production of that speech. But I'm not exactly sure the moral distinction between speech that directly causes the exact same consequences as a result of being put out in the world versus speech that causes the same consequences but in its production. It seems like the same thing is happening, where the speech is being put out and the same negative harm is happening, is occurring. And so clearly in one case you think it's negative and the speech shouldn't be allowed, but in another where it causes the exact same thing, you think it should be allowed.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's a hard
Because I ultimately don't think it's
ethical
the
position to
responsibility.
take.
Well, I think that's nonsense. I think that it's not the responsibility of you speaking about your ideas or making a fictional. Um, it's like the difference between saying like, making a YouTube video where I like blow up a grocery store with a pipe bomb versus making a YouTube video, a fictional short film where somebody does that and then somebody copies me and does it in real life. Like, I don't think I bear the same responsibility in both
I agree,
situations.
but I think that has to do with your knowledge. So when you create a short film, you are under no reasonable circumstance expecting someone to take inspiration and blow up a convenience store, right? That'd be unreasonable. But my question is a little
Sure.
bit more pointed to you. And it's, if you knew that a particular sentence, let's say you could like speak the words and the words would cause someone to go out and molest a child, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that speaking those words would be something that you shouldn't do? Or do you believe that, again, because it's a consequence outside of the production of the words themselves, that it is then justified?
If I knew,
Yeah.
and is there any other reason I want to, like, is there
I
a reason
mean,
I feel like I need to say those words? Like, I guess I
yeah,
would. I personally wouldn't say them, but the
you
question
personally
is,
wouldn't.
would I bear the responsibility if I did anyway?
Mhm.
I guess so, but I just don't think that situation is ever. I think I think
Actually,
I
can
think
I?
part of the idea of free speech is that you don't know.
So can I
So
ask you?
Yes.
Can I ask you? So,
yeah,
I've been dealing with like weirdo pedophiles on Discord for a very long time. Right? Like, having like report them to the police because they're like going after minors on my server, shit like that, right? And
bless you, Doobie.
I do what I can, okay.
I know
But
you do.
a while back, I think it was like a couple years ago, I became aware of a book, right? It was like a guidebook, right? That a couple of them were like passing around, um, or like had, and it was like it's just like instructions for how to like groom a child, basically, right? And you know,
Mhm.
oh, here's what you should do. Here's how to talk to them. Here's how to make them feel comfortable. So it was beyond just like erotica about like children. It was like instructions or advocacy that encourage people to go out and do this thing. Right.
Yeah.
So is there a line there for you? Like they're not just like talking about something like some concept. They're saying that someone should go out and do this thing. You know, they're actually
Uh,
actively advocating for it.
A great
I
real
think that
world example. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's wrong. I think
Okay.
it should be protected speech legally, but I yeah, I would say that is over the line of like, I'm against that.
I don't even think that should be protected legally. That seems like to get into the area of like incitement. Like,
I don't
Oh
think
yeah, I
so.
mean, so do
uh,
you
I don't
just
think you
like
can
disagree
have
with go ahead.
I don't think you can have broad incitement like that. Well, it's not protected legally. If you think that free speech should be restricted so that it is, oh, sorry, it is protected legally. If you think it shouldn't be, then I understand that. But right now, I think you could make a book called How to Groom a Child. I don't know anybody will sell it, but it's not a crime to write it.
yeah, I mean, I'm not saying, yeah, I wasn't saying descriptively. I was saying prescriptively. It should be illegal. Like that sounds like incitement, and it's not about child. I just think anything leading towards like anything that either directly tells people to perform like something we would consider a harmful illegal action,
What about I think
or
most rap music could fall in, well, most gangster rap could fall into, this is an instruction manual for XYZ. There's tons of rap songs
like
that are
what
like,
example?
I don't know, there's a lot of 50 Cent songs where he's talking about like how to kill like kill someone's connect, so that to price manipulation of street drugs, or
Well,
I love
Mr.
50 Cent.
Girl,
how to
Or
load
one thing
guns, how to do a drive-by, how to
how
like there's
to?
a
Yeah,
lot of
that,
kind of
I
yeah.
I've
one
never
thing
heard
you
that in
brought
his
up
discography.
earlier
I
was
love
like the
50 Cent.
tension between why you might want to say something, right? I asked you like if there was a magic sentence you could speak and it would cause this negative effect. Your first question was, well, why would I want to speak that? And I think what you're ultimately talking about is like the potential moral good that might be on the other side of something. So in regards to like rap music,
Also, and
you
freedom.
might make the you might make the argument
freedom.
that like yes, it may cause negative effects, but also it might cause a lot of good effects. You have to weigh those sorts of things. Maybe that's what
Yeah.
you're
So
getting at.
what is the good effect of 50 Cent telling us how to cook crack?
I'm
He'd
not
never.
exactly sure. I don't know the specific song. I'd have
What?
to
That's
see
what I'm
it.
asking. Yeah.
April, you bring up something that I think is
Cake,
important, which
I think Cake
was something that I asked you directly.
Deep song,
But you can go,
he
Mr. Girl.
describes how to cook crack.
What'd you say?
I think in Cake, the Mobb Deep song,
Mm-hmm.
he describes how to cook crack.
Let me go see.
No, but we can look it up. April, you brought up something that kind of ties back to what I asked you earlier, which is like I believe. Let me just like posit what I believe, and then I'll ask you directly. It's like I believe that all outcomes are possible with speech, which is why I'm more concerned about like this question: how do we alleviate the circumstances that lead to bad outcomes? Right. So even if I were to
it's Lloyd Banks,
say,
not Mobb Deep.
even if I were to say that there was a type of music that incites some type of reaction, I believe that any outcome is possible. Like we saw that example with Woodstock 99, that music clearly had a role in not only the incitement of the crowd, but the incitement of a bad outcome. And then the question is like, how do we alleviate those circumstances? So I guess in terms of like, let's say hypothetically speaking, there was a rapper who was explicit about these very things that we believe to exist in rap music. Then the question I think would be, and I'll ask you this, like, how do we alleviate, well, what are the bad outcomes with that music? And then how do we alleviate the circumstances that could lead to those bad outcomes?
So personally, I would say that in regards to a lot of music, there can't be a policy of explicit censorship to controversial music because it's so hard to prove that there would be bad outcomes and that there are like no real good outcomes. And we don't necessarily want to vest power in the government or in private institutions to, personally, I think, to censor that kind of speech. Because ultimately, we can't be sure that when the government censors speech, they're going to do it in our interest, right? So personally, I would say that as a rule, the government should be very conservative at the very least when it comes to censoring, especially artistic endeavors, because it's so hard to tell in the moment, like whether or not something is going to be, explicitly good or bad, what their outcomes are going to be. So I would say that,
I
like,
found the song. It's called "Creep" by Mobb Deep. I was
Creep.
getting my songs
Okay.
mixed up.
I
Yeah,
think I've
cock
heard
that, aim that, squeeze that, shoot the steel, Cadillac, Coupe de Ville, wood grain on the wheel, cocaine in the pot, baking soda water hot. When the ice cube drop, look at that. That's crack. Do we really need
April,
50 Cent teaching us how to make crack?
April, I don't think you're addressing what I'm saying
gonna address you,
directly.
don't worry.
I'm in agreement with you. I'm in
benefit
agreement
of
with you,
that?
by the way. But one of the things I'm particularly talking about is like we understand, I guess we're both in agreement that the government shouldn't overtly target the bad outcomes because that's going to lead to different levels of limitation. But maybe there's a way, and then we can maybe go back and forth on this. Maybe there's a way that the government can work towards alleviating the circumstances that could lead to those outcomes. For example, if we believe that, I'll give like one example, and then maybe this will like help really encapsulate what I'm talking about, because obviously there's people watching and apparently they all think I'm pedantic. But like under the COVID-19 landscape that we're dealing with, there is a lot of parents who are very adamant and aggressive about going to school board meetings, going to the school officials, not only to defy whether it be mask mandates or different types of social distancing guidelines, but also to go to the political institutions, in this case school boards, to directly protest these things. And that, I think, is a bad outcome, because what ends up happening, what has happened, is that parents are getting arrested, people are getting assaulted, death threats are getting sent to government officials. And these are all things that we don't want. So for me, alleviating a circumstance is trying to dissect and really dissect what is going on, like what is the actual thing that parents, politicians, and the like are protesting within mask mandates, and how do we alleviate those concerns as they pertain to masks? Does that make sense?
In this very specific scenario, I'm not a fan of mask mandates. I don't think there's a lot of good evidence to suggest that they're effective, especially just because, like, you know, you're not mandating people use N95s or N95 masks. And so as long as people are allowed to use like cloth masks or to reuse the same mask over and over, it's not really going to be an effective mandate. And so I think people are like quite legitimate in protesting these things. But if we're talking about like sending death threats to people, obviously that's like not good. Or causing
that's an outcome, right? So I'm talking
Right.
specifically about like circumstance alleviation. But yeah, sorry, not to cut you off.
So like the question is like, how do we prevent people from like sending death threats when they're upset about things? I'm not sure. I wish I had an answer, because I feel like if I had an answer to that question, like some silver bullet to make people like discuss their ideas more civilly, I would absolutely implement it. But I'm not sure. That seems like a difficult question. The broad, like lame answer is that like, well, we should encourage a culture of communication and a culture of people being okay with disagreement to some extent, and a culture of people being, you know, aggressive partisanship and tribalism as a negative to avoid. That's like the lame answer, because it's like, okay, well, obviously that'd be good. But as far as like a specific policy implementation that would prevent people from taking their political disagreements or policy disagreements into the realm of actually like attacking people, I'm not exactly sure what like the silver bullet would be.
Yeah, and that's kind of why, like, to cycle all the way back to like what I said in my opening, where like I'm really concerned about circumstance alleviation, because I think what ends up happening is that you get kind of the response that you described, where once we get to like, okay, what are the circumstances, and then we kind of like skip a beat for a second, because it's like, wait a minute, yeah, like if we believe that this is a bad thing, then why aren't we why aren't we prioritizing what the circumstances that lead to these things? Like, for example, one thing that I think is true within the people in protest of diversity equity initiatives and culture responsive teaching is that there's a transparency issue and a communication issue between administration and heads of curriculum to teachers, and then teachers to students, and then students to parents. The communication is getting broken down. So something that I'm very happy that districts are doing is holding more sit-down sessions with parents, sit-down sessions with teachers, sit-down sessions with students to really understand like where these sentiments are coming from. Because I believe that the parents who are protesting and arguing with like CRT, COVID-19, safety of women in bathrooms, they all have valid critiques of what's going on in education. But the problem is that they're all functioning on different levels of information. Some of it is misinformation.
No one's here to help you.
Some of it,
you can raise your hand. No one's gonna save you.
I know people. People say I'm like an ass sometimes, but I'm actually a very nice person. But Joe, you're boring as fuck right now. You're way off topic. We're down that rabbit hole for the 5th time. Please, let's try to stay on topic, okay? We don't need to talk about mask mandates or how to keep the parents happy or any of that bullshit. We're talking about censorship and the responsibility people have to the damage that their words can do in the
which I think is absolutely
that has nothing to do. That has nothing to do with how we make parents feel good about what the schools are teaching. Right?
No,
because the misinformation
how do we mitigate the negative effects of speech and people getting riled up about these topics. How do we mitigate those effects?
What if it's something they should get riled up about?
Well, Joe Lewis is saying that one thing we can do is hold like sit-down meetings where people feel really hurt.
About what?
Right? About COVID or mask mandates or bathrooms.
About COVID, masks.
You think
what's in
them feeling
libraries.
heard? You think them feeling heard, right? You hearing them out about their concerns about CRT, but then teaching the CRT anyway, or hearing them out about the mask mandates, but then doing the mask mandate anyway is going to make them feel any better? No, the way that you stop that, right, is you actually, like us, don't do the thing that they don't want you to do. That's how you do it. Right, but if we're not willing to do that, then we need to acknowledge that we're not willing to do that thing, even after hearing them out and wasting their fucking time for hours, right? That we're having these meetings. We need to acknowledge, hey, you're going to come in here, you're going to talk at us. We're going to acknowledge that you talked at us, and we're going to do what we want to do anyway, because fuck you, right? That's not really helping anybody. I think that's not really dealing with the topic at hand, which is what responsibility do people have for the speech and the damage that the speech can do.
All right, bam.
Right.
Yeah.
What damage does the speech have to posit the idea that you should not get a vaccination to go to schools?
Did I look up that 50 Cent lyric for nothing?
No, I did want to address it. Actually, I was just trying to cut off their like
You just have to jump in. It's never.
We can
well, I mean, no, it's fine.
We can table it for later, April.
I didn't want to because I don't want to feel like I can't acknowledge it directly. Like it's not actually like if you look at the song itself, the song isn't like glorifying and telling people to do that. If anything, it's the exact opposite. Like the song is about how awful the conditions are in these communities and how you shouldn't want to be here. It's like literally what's a few other lyrics, because I didn't even realize I remember the song until I started looking at it. Don't go and get comfortable. Don't know what he told you. It ain't sweet around here, and I don't care what he told you. Ain't sweet around here.
That's Lloyd Banks.
Yes, but I'm saying it's a part of the same song. They're both the concept they're dealing with. It like you have to be really rough and tumble to exist in the neighborhoods and communities that they're talking about.
So you're saying,
and you don't want to be here.
That 50 Cent does not glorify his drug dealing days and his music.
50 Cent, all 50 Cent talks about now is how much money he has. Like literally that when the original G Unit, 50 Cent was shot 9 times. No, it's not like I don't think it's something he's proud of. I think it's something that it's a descriptive reality of the situation he came from, and he's proud he overcame it.
Tip, stunt, I get on some shit. Different day, different bitch. Old hoodie, new kicks. Oldsmobile, fuck that. No rim, hubcaps. Keep my eyes open. Well, I can't say this line, but.
Yeah, it's all under this overall idea of how distraught and bad the situation these people are coming from, and this is what they've done to survive it.
Wait, but I don't think a lot of times they're presenting it.
I don't think he's talking about how bad things are there.
Yeah,
the same argument you can make.
A lot of these things are there.
Like if 50 Cent came out, he was like, "Yeah, I was glorifying crack dealing," you'd be like, "Well, then I think that should be banned."
Like why are we acting like
and I think
rap music that does these
we're not
things?
acting like it's
rock
just rap
music does this. Yeah, so
we're not acting like it's just rap music. We're just talking about rap music right now.
I had an inkling that you'd be more likely to defend rap music than you would be to defend Lolita, and you are.
True.
And now you're whataboutisming it, but
not whataboutisming it. I'm answering you directly.
Well, okay, I'm asking you directly. If 50 Cent said, "Yes, I made this song because I want people to deal drugs. I want them to kill people. I want them to do crack." And that's what. Do you think it should be illegal? Do you think the cops should?
I think that would be considered incitement if that's your intention.
So even if it was the same song, you're saying that 50 Cent 20 years later,
disagreeing with your context.
He said, I know. I'm saying if 50 Cent came out and said that song "Creep," yeah, I made that because I want people to deal drugs. Do you think the police should come and be like, "Well, Mr. Cent, you're under arrest for the crime of incitement"?
Well, just because a lot of things are illegal doesn't mean the response to something illegal is always arrest. Speeding is illegal, but that doesn't mean every speeding.
Okay, but you think there
should get a ticket?
I'm saying that if we know that if you're doing something to incite violence, I'm answering your question. I'm answering your question. I can't be more directly than I'm doing.
Yes, It's a yes or no question.
No,
If
there's not.
50
No, they're
Cent
not.
said,
Only dumb people say it's a yes or no question. Only dumb people say that
okay,
because
then I'm dumb.
they don't want context
Dumb, and I'm
to the
inviting you
answer.
to be dumb with me. If 50
I
Cent,
refuse.
out,
I'm not
that's
calling.
fine.
I'm not. Well, I
Okay,
guess I
there's
am
3
calling you
answers.
dumb. I'm not
There's
gonna
3.
run
There's
from
yes, no, and you're too smart to answer this question. And if you want to choose that one, that's fine. If 50
It's not-
Cent said unequivocally, I made that song Creep because I want people to deal drugs, smack bitches.
I already
or
answered
shoot
this.
people.
I already answered
Yes
this,
or
and
no,
I'm trying to.
do you think he should get a ticket or any other punishment from the
Yes,
government?
there should be punishment if you're inciting violence. Yes. But that's
Legal-
not.
legal
But you see how that's useless because we have no context involved with that. But that's what you
There's no
want.
other
You wanted a
what
contextualist.
what context you need to shove into that to like explain your answer?
I mean, Bam,
because all that's going to do is you're going to apply some other example, and you're going to say, well, why doesn't it some other like example that had some
No,
key
I'm
difference?
actually just finding out.
Hold on 1 second. Let me finish what I'm saying.
crazy you
Because
are.
what?
I
Hold
don't
on
have
1 second.
any other.
Hold
I
on
don't-
1 second.
I'm
I'm
not
not talking to you.
not a
I'm
trap.
saying I'm addressing Doobie right now because Doobie said why is context necessary? Context
knows
is
it's not a
necessary
trap.
because
Not
context is
necessary. Context is boring.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. Context is necessary, Doobie, because
Oh,
whenever you just say a yes or no to something, someone can throw out another example, and then you might have a different answer, and they're not going to know what the distinction is. But when you use context, you can isolate what the distinctions are, what the specific criteria are that can make one situation different from another. That's why context is important.
I think this
Context is
policy
boring. It's
that
such a weird comment.
policy you're supporting will disproportionately affect black people.
It won't. because
I mean, it probably will.
But it won't.
Bam,
Well,
can I ask you a question?
But you're saying
that glorify violence and crime in their art more than anybody else that I can think of.
Rock
Yeah,
does it
sure.
all
Where
the
do you see
time. This is a bad
glorification?
example.
I don't.
Wait, hold on.
Death metal,
So
deathcore,
gang activity, drug use, drug selling, like that's just glorified all the time in
It's
gangster rap.
all.
Not even
glorified
just
rock,
gangster rap, like just
reggae.
rap in general.
People say gangster rap is so weird. Like gangster rap isn't even like.
Okay,
a,
if you want to
popular
pretend that
rap motto
gangster rap
in
isn't
2020.
like a rap
Bam.
genre, we can pretend it's not. Okay, that's
We're not
stupid, but
Ice-T in the '80s. Gangster rap is not even like a genre in.
yeah,
in
but you
well-
think Ice-T in the '80s, especially at the height of the drug epidemic, where a lot of these the communities were dealing with like gangs and drug dealers tearing their communities apart. You think that Ice-T making music glorifying that shit back then, he probably should have been arrested or put in prison or something, right? Or had some kind of legal consequence.
Wait, what?
Has some kind of legal
You
consequence
are
for what he was
Karen.
doing.
You're a
What
Karen.
responsibility does the label have to that for putting that out? If they
Wait,
know
but-
that this
but
might
Bam
cause
just
them,
said that-
like,
No one actually
Bam
believes
just
that
said-
in this
harm.
panel.
You are
No one
Bam
believes
just
Yeah.
said that he
Yeah,
does.
art should be censored in this way.
Wait,
Yeah.
but Bam
Right?
just said that he does. He just
But
said that
I
there
said
should be
that-
some kind of
No, I
consequence.
didn't. I said
He
nothing
said
about.
that in the scenario where you could explicitly prove that the rapper released the song with the intention to harm people,
Because he
and
said
it
it.
did harm people, and you can draw a one-to-one comparison.
No.
Then it
You
would be
know,
justified.
not
Talking
and it
about
did harm
inciting.
people. That was not the hypothetical. The hypothetical was he said he did it for the purpose of getting people to smack bitches and cook crack and shoot people. And
Yeah.
Bam said, yes, that should be a crime, and that is a Karen stance.
Okay.
You see
Well,
how?
I think-
Now we
Bam,
have no
Bam.
context.
Bam,
Yeah.
real
That
quick.
is strongman Bam's position. I
It
think you
wouldn't
would
need to be
also
strongman if I could
add
have
the
added context.
qualification that you must be able to prove that there was actually a real crime that was directly inspired by that intention.
That is not the question I asked him. That's
I
just
know,
a different
but I think that's what
hypothetical
he
that would
would
make his
say.
answer make more sense. But that's not what he said. I wanted to
No, you
drill
wouldn't let
down-
me say anything. That's the point. You only said a yes or a no because you said you didn't want context, and I'm showing you how stupid that
That's
was now.
Adding extra shit to the hyphypothetical to change it is not
It's
context.
not adding.
It's my
Yeah,
hypothetical.
adding.
It's my world
no,
that,
no.
that you're living in when you're answering this question. So I can make up whatever I want, and then if you're going along with the hypothetical, you just have to answer.
Yeah, Bam, can you readdress the hypothetical, but understanding that the hypothetical did not include an actual harm perpetrated by someone? It's just in the hypothetical, he said that it was intended to cause people to smack bitches and deal drugs and so on.
I
Do you
I think
that should be
I think
fine?
that no, I think there should still be consequences. Yes, I don't think the punishment is prison. I think that like I
Yes,
think that
legal
there can
con-
still
okay,
be.
that's-
I think
that was
there. I
the
think
first
there.
question. Do you think
I'm
there should be
trying to
any
tell you
legal
what those types of
consequences?
consequences.
He said yes. Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, fine.
April,
you
you
see,
said yes.
you say we know nothing that
Okay.
we're not any more
We
closer
know
to
we
what
know
I
you want
actually believe.
consequences. You want legal
No, yeah,
consequences.
we
That's
do
fine.
understand your position better now.
But you don't. That's what I'm saying. You have no idea what I believe.
It. So we had to get you to say it again just so April could.
Because legal
wrap her
consequences
mind
could
around
just be
what you're
that song isn't played on radio, and you would say, "Oh, that doesn't count as legal consequences," but you don't know that because I not allowed to give any
It does.
context.
That's censorship. That's a legal consequence.
Bam, can I pick your brain on something?
Oh.
Yeah, you're familiar with Woodstock 99, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like in the context of Woodstock 99, Limp Bizkit was explicitly told to stop for the crowd to calm down. In that, he chose not to do that and played break stuff right after he was told that. And it's on film. So do you think that Limp Bizkit is responsible for the actions that happened during his set, or during their set, I should say?
Yeah, he has a level of responsibility, and
Okay.
I think it would be dishonest to say like it has nothing to do with him. Like obviously he plays a part in it, but that, like I said, the responsibility, the response should be also like the punishment should fit the crime. Again, it doesn't mean anyone's thrown in prison. It doesn't mean anyone's like, yeah.
What do you mean?
Sure,
What do you mean?
well,
No, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, now you want context? No,
Well,
I'm
the
not giving you
punishment,
context
the
now.
punishment should fit the crime. Like if
You
there's
don't
a
deserve
riot,
context.
like
Well,
what punishment fits the crime of like inciting a riot? Like,
Doobie doesn't want
well, multiple
context.
women,
probably prison
women,
time. Honestly,
I mean, multiple women at Woodstock 99 were sexually assaulted, some of which have never even got their cases resolved. There are multiple examples of acts at the event facilitating that very behavior. And it took a lot of people to convince acts to say like, hey, like you have to tone down what you're saying when you're on stage talking to the crowd. The reason why I brought up the Olympistic example is because I think that might be the clearest example that comes to mind, at least for me, about like where I think artists do have a level of responsibility for the actions that they do. Like when you are on a
NWA
stage,
too, with, like,
yeah, I mean they were charged for inciting a riot. I think it was at Madison Square, like, and they got can't, and I think it even got like cut short. Like it's very clear that like the actions. And some, and again, like some companies do different things, right? Obviously, we're like dealing with Travis Scott right now and his responsibility for what happened at his event. So like, I think we're all in agreement that artists do have a level of responsibility, especially if you can reasonably assume that their actions led to whatever harm you might deem intolerable. And like in terms of Woodstock 99, sexual assault, and people literally dying, or even the Travis Scott situation of people literally dying, where I think we understand that artists do have responsibility for the label and what they say.
So if that's the case, like why not extend that a little further? So there are lots of artists who glorify not just drug dealing, but drug use.
The glorifying isn't necessarily incitement.
Hold on, violence. They glorify like the gang that they happen to be in, the set that they happen to be part of, right? And I think you could probably find some connection.
I've given the distinction before you even finish this question. It's not incitement.
Just don't interrupt. Control your impulses.
Do it anyways.
Control your impulses for like 10 more seconds. It's okay. Right?
So
you could probably find some connection, right? We could probably find some connection between young people who get into that lifestyle and listening to that music that glorifies this lifestyle they end up getting into, right? So if you could find that connection, right, and we could demonstrate, right, that the creation of this music, right, with these messages is leading to more people thinking that it's cool to be in a gang, and leading to more of these people getting into the gang lifestyle, and with all the bad things that happens to people that get into that, should we then just ban the music?
Number one, this doesn't happen. Number two,
I don't think that's
glorification.
True. I don't think you could just say just flat out it doesn't happen. That's like bullshit. I know that's bullshit. I think you know
I'm
that's
not calling
bullshit.
BS because I specifically.
Wait, hold on. I forgot. You're the guy who thinks that gangs don't wear like gang colors. So yeah, I forgot.
Yeah, you think that, like I said, you're the guy that thinks that life works like GTA.
I'm the guy who understands that. Yeah, the Bloods and the Crips have gang colors. Lots of gangs have colors that they wear. Yeah.
Yes, that's not. Again, this isn't the reality of 2022. This isn't how you identify.
I don't think think you know what the fuck you're talking about.
Hold
But
on, control your impulse.
given that you don't know what the fuck you're
Responding.
talking about, I'm not.
Control your impulses,
I am
Doobie.
controlling my impulse.
Doobie.
I recognize
control
this
yourself,
impulse,
man.
and I'd
Young
like
man.
to confront you and tell
frog.
you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And that's what
Frogger.
makes this totally illogical answer you're about to give us make sense because you
Okay,
just don't
good.
know what you're talking about. So it's fine.
Can I ask a question?
Hold on. First, hold on. I'm going to answer his question. It's his
Okay.
very dumb and correct question. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen because music responds to culture. Like culture doesn't necessarily. It doesn't work the other way around. Culture doesn't respond to music. Like you can't. You're people. People are going to, especially rap in particular, is a very it comes out of a for the people. It was an it was started as an anti-establishment brand, being the people talking about the conditions that they come from. So rap music isn't like what's putting people in these positions. People are in these positions and they're talking about the things that they experience. But even if I granted you your point, even like I said, I disagree with. Even if I granted you the point that it was that it happened to lead to whatever consequences you said were happening, glorification is an incitement, and cool. Now,
Wait,
now you can ask me.
So to be clear, when you say that music doesn't respond to culture, or music responds to culture doesn't like make the culture, whatever.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that all those emo kids that were walking around doing emo shit, in the 90s and early 2000s, right, listening to emo music, right, that with emo bands that dress a certain way, did certain things to let everybody know how emo they are. Telling me the kids that started doing that after listening to these music, becoming fans of this band, that this was just like inherent in them. They didn't like respond to the music and start doing the thing because the artists were doing it and they thought it was cool, so they wanted to look like the artists.
I don't know if that's really culture, but they already the feeling was already there.
But
the feeling to like wear black makeup and paint your nails black and wear like fucking thick bracelets, that was like inherent in them, and they heard the music and it awakened it or some shit, right? Like, you know how stupid that sounds? Like, come on.
But I don't know, Doobie. Would you hold the same level of scrutiny to Linkin Park? Do you think that Linkin Park overtly? Okay.
I'd hold it to every group, right? But so I think that music definitely influences people to behave in certain ways, right?
I want to make sure you understand. I want to make sure you're like addressing my point directly. So, do you think that Linkin Park is responsible for the inclination and the increases of teen suicides in the United States in the 2000s?
Probably. Yeah, there are probably some kids who listen to. Well, I don't know if like Linkin Park.
Crawling in my skin, these wounds they will not heal.
Yeah, but most Linkin Park
Fear is how I fall.
Is like not like that, right? Most of Linkin Park's music isn't that, but that song specifically, yeah, I'm sure there was like some teenage girl out there, some teenage boy who was just really depressed about what's going on the left. And they listened to the song about how it's never going to get
not just that
about
song.
how it's never about please and listen to the song about how it's never going to get any better, and yeah, they just pushes them deeper into this hole because they fully identify with that feeling and they decide to kill themselves. Yeah, I'm sure that's the thing. Actually, there's a really famous song called the Hungarian Suicide Song. Beautiful song. It's one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard in my life. Just like everything about it is beautiful. The lyrics are beautiful, the melody is beautiful, but it's actually banned in a lot of countries because for a long time when people committed suicide, they were listening to that song. That song was playing on the record player, right? So they ended up banning it in a lot of countries. So I would say that they are somewhat responsible, and that the media, the thing that they created, maybe like fostered environment or created an environment that pushed people deeper into this pit that they're in, and led to them committing suicide. Now, would I say that they're like fully responsible for the suicide and they should be like put in prison or something? No, right? But I think we need to acknowledge that there is some responsibility there, right? That the things you put out into the world don't just like go nowhere and have zero impact. They do impact people, right, in very serious ways. But what I'm saying is like acknowledging that BAM seems to think that there might be some level at which we should like give people legal consequences for that fact. I don't know if I agree with that. And I think Mr. Girl's perspective is like just no legal consequences, right?
Like, what if there's like a
no, I specifically was talking about
pedophile rap.
I have a question.
People into
so
pedophiles.
if you could look at like the riots that occurred with Black Lives Matter, and you could look at political pundits and talk and show that they're lying about, say, Breonna Taylor, saying that she was shot in her bed, or they're lying about like Kyle Rittenhouse, and they're saying that
Yeah.
he shot black people. Does
Yeah.
that count like as incitement when you then look at like the millions of dollars in property damage or the people that were killed?
Well,
Absolutely.
April, this is where I think misinformation and disinformation is important, because like if I believe that misinformation is false and inaccurate information with varying degrees of intentionality, and disinformation is false and accurate information explicitly intended to mislead, if you can prove that these sentiments that these politicians and otherwise explicitly were trying to mislead the public, then I think you have like an argument there. But I think it's hard to discern
I
if
don't
people
know.
were.
I think that even if you're not intentionally doing it, if you're like a politician or if you're a leader, I think you have a responsibility to know what the fuck you're talking about. If you're going to
Politicians lie all the time, though, and we don't
absolutely,
know
they shouldn't lie. But I'm saying even if you think you're telling the truth about the Breonna Taylor killing, and you say some shit that's not true, and it makes people riot, I do think you, as a leader, bear some, I don't know, legal responsibility, but political at least. I think that should be at
I
least
think
worth
there's
a censure, maybe an impeachment.
It seems like
I-
left-wing misinformation causes like an enormous amount of destructive harm. Yet
So does
this
the
panel
right.
was like
It's not.
started with the premise that like conservative misinformation is overwhelmingly or just like
Yeah,
tends to be more destructive.
I agree with
Well-
you. I consider myself, pretty left leaning, but the Kyle Rittenhouse shit was insane. Like, you can't 99% of liberals, you cannot have a conversation with them about Kyle
Mhm.
Rittenhouse without them saying something completely fucking batshit insane or untrue.
It appears to me
Okay.
that the only examples that people posit in terms of misinformation when it comes to the left seems to be specifically within Black Lives Matter and within the sentiments of just broader civil rights in the United States. Is there another example, April, that you have of like overt misinformation of the left that's not Black Lives
There's
Matter?
a subreddit that exists right now on
But
Reddit
I'm asking
called Herman
Sorry.
Cain Award. And it basically celebrates the death of people who died from COVID if they were anti-maskers or anti-vaxxers. I mean, the idea that like mask mandates are this like super effective thing is just not premised on any like real information, especially when it comes to cloth masks. Like whether or not someone died from COVID has like almost no bearing on whether or not they wore like some dirty cloth mask into their grocery
To
store.
be fair, the Herman
April,
Cain
I'm
Awards isn't just about people wearing mask mandates. It's like people saying that they are anti-vax. They're not going to get the vax, right? Like, and being proud about anti-vax, encouraging people to be anti-vax, and then dying from the pandemic. So that's what that.
I mean, another one would be like how liberals went on and on about Russiagate, right, with Trump, and continually pushed the narrative that there was like collusion. This is happening on like mainstream news media outlets. I mean, we could like run down the list.
full
It
FBI.
happens with basically every issue.
I think if the president of the United States is being investigated by the FBI for possible coordination with a foreign power, that is a super important, relevant news story. I don't think that reporting on that is pushing a narrative.
Reporting on it is not a problem, but reporting on it as if it's already true is a problem.
Who did that?
I mean, I think you can look at like these.
Just show me one
exactly
article.
What they're called, like talk show hosts, right?
Like
who are not necessarily the most politically informed,
infotainment people,
but they're making jokes about how like as if it's already a done deal. I think that's problematic.
Yes, I think that's fair. I think that I think it's a big problem that CNN has those infotainment in between Anderson Cooper. 1 second he's making jokes and giving his opinion. Another second he's reporting. I agree that is extremely problematic.
April, why don't you?
Like ivermectin horse medicine, right? In regards to Joe Rogan, ivermectin is medicine for humans. It's been given to millions of people worldwide, right? So to call it like horse medicine and to like denounce it as this crazy thing, that's misinformation. You're actively engaging in like assassination of someone's character.
But it's also not generally like it doesn't have like when people are No, I'm not saying that humans can't use it for things, but I'm saying in relationship to like COVID-19, There's no information showing it to have positive effects, and people are using the horse methods and variation.
I mean,
Like
the
people-
only example, an example that comes to mind of like actual disinformation, like within the left, I think Rachel Maddow is the best example, when she overtly advertised that she had Donald Trump's tax returns, and then had that story, built up that story, propagated that story, and then we found out that, well, sure, you have a tax return, but you don't have the embodiment of what people on the left were asking for when they were asking for Donald Trump's tax returns. I think it's a better example.
Also a good example.
Okay,
and I also think that,
so
like,
if you guys are,
she brought up BLM. This is the last thing. I know you can go. I think that the Kyle Rittenhouse situation was to like I was actually a big, well, it sounds super cringe. I was a big, I fought against the Kyle Rittenhouse narrative. I think that a lot of the way that was handled was generally really irresponsible. But more directly to the Breonna Taylor case, as far as like saying that misinformation led to a level of violence and destruction, I'm going to accept that some portion of that was true. But do you believe that the change in details would have made BLM feel dramatically different about the outcome of the situation?
I mean, the original story was that she was shot in her bed.
I'm saying, do you think that even the proper narrative, like, do you think that the people who were protesting for Black Lives Matter still wouldn't have had a problem? I'm not saying if you think
they might have an issue, but they wouldn't think that police were marching into somebody's house and shooting her in her bed while she's asleep, or executing Michael Brown in the middle of the street.
Remember how that's not the question I asked?
Her boyfriend is firing shots. So I think the difference between the actual narrative, which is like knocks, come to the door, announce themselves, even though they aren't required to by law, and they're shot at, versus the narrative that was, I heard, right, initially, was that this woman was shot in her bed, just, because cops broke down the door. And
I think you just did a misinformation.
People, right? I think that kind of misinformation is really dangerous, and
I think what you just did was misinformation.
No, that's not. That's
not
true. What about what you said was misinformation?
Because you confirmed what you said to be like a hard truth. The reality is, I think there was no confirmation of them knocking and announcing.
Yeah.
They said as much. There's no
they did some. Yeah. There's a split.
Neighbors are like,
no one can really
that's at best
prove
mix.
Whether they announce themselves. That's true.
Yeah.
There's some people dispute that,
and
but they say that they did.
But I'm saying that I think that's a really key thing to be acknowledged as far as like information, and the second factor being like them, the idea of him like just shooting, like his response, particularly being him shooting in response to like someone breaking into his house.
And part of this is like is trust and authority, right? I mean, the cops say that they did this, right? But we have a long history now, like over just the past like 10 years of these videos of cops saying one thing, we see a video and they're fucking lying, right? They prove themselves to be absolute goddamn liars. So you're saying, well, yeah, the cops said this, and I don't think you're going hard on this, April, but like the cops said that they announced themselves, other people said they didn't. Like, are we going to believe the authorities because they are the authorities?
Wait, but one of the people, so this was happening in the middle of the night, by the way, right? So lots of people in the building would have been asleep, for the first like shout outs if they did happen. But the guy who was there when the cops got there, he said they did announce themselves once. They knocked more than once. The boyfriend acknowledges that they heard knocking right when they were in bed. So we have acknowledgement they were knocking. The guy that was awake that we know was awake the entire time and was in the hallway, saw the cops coming. He says they did announce themselves once, but we also know that they didn't need to announce themselves because this was like a no-knock warrant, if I remember correctly. So they actually did more than they legally had to do, right? So that narrative, I think, is a lot friendlier, or a lot more.
What you said even
a lot
true?
less.
I think you just lied again.
Google it.
The boyfriend acknowledged that he heard them knock.
Yes.
Sure,
just
the
lied.
boyfriend did,
Yes.
but there are other
Wait,
witnesses.
hold on. Wait, this is why he got his gun, right? Because he heard banging at the door.
Oh, you heard people breaking this out. You said that them knocking and announcing themselves like that.
You're
I
missing.
think it's better if we only use examples where we all basically agree. on what the facts are. I feel like this is going to turn into a
No,
binder
this is
fight, and I don't like
Sure.
binder fights.
this is
Like,
bullshit. This is it's important for this topic. Like we're talking
No.
about
I think
we're talking about specifically.
we can
You've
all
cut me off
agree.
all night. I'm going to power through on this
Yes.
one. Okay. So
Okay, go ahead.
we have spent this entire topic talking about how information can lead to certain outcomes that we don't like. So Bam, directly, would you say a circumstance to alleviate this outcome could be police filing police reports and force reports to the best of their ability as soon as possible, probably within 24 hours of the incident?
Absolutely.
Do you think? Okay. Does anybody disagree with that?
I think that's
No, that
legitimate.
sounds like a great idea.
So that's an example that I was trying to make, and you guys continue to try to obfuscate this point that we have to start identifying circumstances that can alleviating circumstances. So the circumstance here in question is that it's very clear that the police documentation and the police reporting was shoddy at best. With that led
Agreed.
to multiple misinformation that April acknowledged that she did on this panel, that Bam clearly acknowledged. He debunked it and amended it, so he corrected narrative. And April, to the best of her ability, took it on the chin, kept the ball moving. Right, that's a good thing that happened in discourse. However, something that does happen, as we see with COVID-19, is that even being presented with misinformation and even disinformation, the debunking and the amending of this information, it doesn't work for a lot of individuals. And that's something that
I gotta say,
try to explore.
so so I don't think what April did was misinformation at all. I think
He just didn't use.
I think Bam, what you were doing was misinformation. But I agree with Mr. Girl. Maybe we shouldn't be using examples that where everybody doesn't agree about the circumstances.
Yeah, because then we gotta fucking hash it out. Like there's stuff that we
fine.
agree generally it was just a lie, and
Sure.
in broad strokes, the Breonna Taylor story was not true, and then the Kyle Rittenhouse story was not true, and
right.
What the truth is, I don't think matters that much. For our purposes, I just think acknowledging that there's a big difference.
Well, no, what the truth is, the truth matters because we're under the assumption that if even in the fairest case scenario, because I'm not going to say best case scenario where the cop did everything right, specifically in the Breonna Taylor case, because that wouldn't be true to know for sure did all you. But in the fairest case scenario of description of the case, I believe that people would still be justifiably upset with how that situation.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
some people can and should be upset either way. But I think that we agree that the truth is probably significantly less upsetting than the story we all first heard.
I don't know, someone who hasn't committed a crime dying in their house. I feel like it's still generally pretty upsetting.
That happened in both stories. In one of the stories, she had no relation to the person they were looking for and was lying in bed and got shot randomly by cops because she's black. And in the other story, she was sort of involved in the case, even though they already had the person in custody. And they did have a warrant for her house. It was not the wrong house, and she was not lying in bed. And the cops did not just shoot for it. So whatever I'm sure you agree with parts of what I just said. So I'm just saying, if we can agree in broad strokes that the narrative that went around was more upsetting and probably went around incendiary, then we can agree there was a break with reality, whatever that break might have been.
So if we can agree to that, and I think we can also agree that a lot of these media organizations and politicians, weeks later, months later, when we had all the facts, right, we knew the original story was incorrect, they were still going around saying that she was murdered in bed, right? And with the Kyle Rittenhouse thing, I think there was a couple newspapers that printed that this guy killed black people, right? So those people, given that kind of misinformation, whether or not they intended to be misinformation, it could be that they're just fucking lazy, right? Given that kind of misinformation could incite or lead to riots or racial animosity between people, should there be consequences for them?
If you're releasing misinformation, I think that not like I said, intentionally bad misinformation. I think that's just that's bad on your job. Like there's consequences for that already.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I
I'm
mean,
not
should
talking
there
about like
be
social
consequences?
consequences.
Well,
Yes,
I
but
think there
those
should be
consequences should come
political
from
and possibly legal.
individuals.
I think I think if you are in the government, then and you're talking about this stuff, I don't think your speech should be protected there nearly as much as if you're not. So I think if you are lying from your position of authority, I think I don't know about legal consequences, but political consequences for sure. I think that should be like
Yeah, I addressed this with Prime's
censure.
question about, but those people present like if you're in that level, if you're in that position, like I can see
Probably be
in that
removed
case
from
people coming
office.
from your job. Well, not people coming for it, but you lose your job due to
I think that's
just
yeah.
being irresponsible at your job.
Bam, to
I'm
push back a little
confused.
bit. What's weird to me is that like this happens all the time. It's just power. Like all we're talking about is just the ability to define phenomena and then make it act in a desired manner. That's all power is. And then the information is adjusted and used however way. This is how like power leads to propaganda. And then within that propaganda, there's going to be omission of information all the time. Like every single politician does this for almost every single thing they do. But again, like I think it's much more productive to like look at the circumstances and try to alleviate them to lead to these things that we think are bad. Like generally speaking, propaganda is neutral. Like information that's used to promote a political cause or perspective, we do this all the time. We've done this on this panel. We all have different positions and we're trying to push our own propaganda, our own messaging. But at the end of the day, clearly, certain information can lead to misinformation or disinformation based on intent. Like that's kind of why I'm confused about your position, Bam. But we can hash it out at a different time.
No, that's good. Like, I agree with you. I'm not. I don't have an issue with narratives, and I don't think that anytime someone releases something that, like, someone else decides, like, that doesn't feel contextually like all the way there. I don't think that the response is always going to be firing them. But I'm saying there has to be some threshold of like what we hope, which I think the threshold we have now is honestly more or less decent, at least as far as like national news. Like Fox News has commentators that can say things are incorrect all the time, but like their articles, their information section is generally as close to accurate as possible. And if you can point it out, like, and if you do find something that's like demonstrably incorrect, like they have some level of responsibility of changing that. But that's different from people commentating and like pinning, twisting narratives. Like I think.
Yeah, but then the tricky part is like, as we see, if you have politicians, and this is like and again, like I don't know where to start with this, is that when you have misinformation, especially when it's unintentional, where it's just like a piece of something that's generally inaccurate, but it's not at the level of scrutiny and they'd be like, wow, like I can't believe they're saying this. Sometimes I can morph in such a way that can lead to things that we deem undesirable. Like even with ivermectin, like we understand that there is an actual like information about ivermectin towards like individuals, and then there's also the truth about ivermectin as it pertains to animals. Like both of these things are true, but the problem is that the way that, I guess to your point, the way that mass media talks about these things, like they can, again, because it's all about power, like however they choose to navigate this phenomena and however they see fit, they are going to in turn, based on whatever their biases are, like omit certain things, whether it be intentional or otherwise. And that is kind of weird. I don't think there's a way to clearly do this, but I think at the very least companies should have some type of language around misinformation and disinformation. I think that's a perfect start.
The chat, I do acknowledge it on both sides. I actually prefer mainstream media to like social media and all these like third-party medias, because I think they're held to a higher standard overall, even though they still suck sometimes. So like, don't believe that I picked Fox News because I'm trying to cook for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like your position is really inconsistent, to be honest.
It's not.
It seems like it is.
Not though. That's just
even Joe's position seems inconsistent, because if you're saying that,
we're
hey,
allowed to be inconsistent about things. I don't think you would have any issue with that.
I think
all right,
so,
guys. I have to go.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we can table that.
Well, sure, no problem. I was just about to end this anyway. But to my audience, 1 second, please. To my audience, thank you all for being here. We will continue on for our open walk on panel. We're not done here. Okay, we're going to continue on. We'll have another panel after this, right? Open walk on panel also like you just sitting at home may participate, right? But before then, do me a favor, hit that follow button. If you haven't done so yet, hit that follow button right now. Make sure notifications are on so you know I'm going live. I do this 6 nights a week, right? Come to this channel, PrimeCayes, PrimeCayes, and hit that follow button because we're always providing you content. So we want to see you there. I'm gonna give an outro to all my individual guests here. I'll start with Mr. Girl because he has to go first, right? Especially with social and chat also for our social media. Before I forget that. But Mr. Girl, thank you so much for coming through and being a part of this. Did you enjoy your time here?
Sort of. Some parts of it were pretty brutal.
Okay. All right. Oh, well, anyway.
There's some parts I liked, but some parts I just feel like I don't know what we're talking about. It drives me insane.
Okay then. All right. So.
But I appreciate you having me all the same.
Absolutely.
And,
we're happy to have you.
And April, it was good to meet you.
Likewise. For sure.
Joe, Bam, good to meet you as well. And Doobie, I'll see you tomorrow.
Everyone check out Mr. Girl's
Wait,
channel.
no, not tomorrow. The day after tomorrow. The day after tomorrow.
Monday. Yeah.
Fuck.
And you've been doing the
I
Twitch
got all my
thing for
chat.
like a month, and you're missing days already. What the fuck's wrong with you?
I'm out.
Yeah, Monday.
He's stressed.
Monday. I
Everyone
think
wants to talk to him.
have a good time. Okay, I'm gonna introduce you to all the nice people in my community. You're gonna hear all the terrible stories about them being Nazis, but I promise it's exaggerated just a little bit.
Nazis?
They're not Nazis. They're very nice people. Some of them are probably Nazis, but not most of them.
Got them excited.
Break from Nazis for now. All right. Well, thank you, Prime. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good one. Thank you.
See you next time.
Okay. And we'll get to our rest of our guests. So we have our MVP here. We call him Joe Lewis. Joe Lewis, thank you for coming through. This was a rough one, unexpectedly. That was not the plan. I can assure you, Joe, but that's kind of where we ended up. But Joe, you handled it well, I thought. You rolled with the punches. What exactly I would expect from an MVP like you. So Joe Lewis, thanks for coming through.
Yeah, just thanks for having me. I guess like the overall thought is, I guess like the guiding thought is just kind of just setting the floor. A lot of people don't like me in the space. They've made it very clear in public and private that they don't like me. And sometimes when you get these individuals all together in the same space and have conversations about things, clearly it's going to go a little here and there. Obviously, like I addressed my community about the situation on Monday. They made it very clear and they addressed me. But obviously people won't see stuff like that, right? They're just going to, and this is one of the biggest problems with Twitch and the large, right? Is that people just harken back to the instance that they remember. Like they're not going to see or even hear about like me addressing this with my community. They're not going to see the mods that leave my space and all this other stuff. But I still have to deal with the consequences of that. So it is what it is. But either way, like it's no lost blood, Prime. It happens, same shit, different toilet. But either way, glad to be here nonetheless.
All right, man. And I appreciate it. I got nothing but love for you, Joe. So, all right. Next we'll go Black American Made. I have contempt for this one. But Black American Made, Black American Made, though, thank you as always. I'm really happy you answered the call. I needed someone to help fill in. And it's like, you do that. It's not like you just were standing, you just like sat here. No, you came in and you were swinging. And I expect nothing less from you. So thank you so much, Bam, for being a part of all this.
Yeah, thanks. Like I said, I'm always glad when you invite me on. Yeah, I got to fight with some people. I don't know. It was like the sections that were like really weird, but it was also sections that were like pretty good overall. Anyways, yeah, I'm always looking to do this. Y'all follow me on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter sometimes. I guess if you think I'm a terrorist, a 9/11 terrorist. But yeah, thanks. I'm never good at outros.
Okay.
Thanks.
No, that's no problem. All right. Why don't we go to Doobie next, our Dark Lord and Savior. Doobie, thank you for coming. Thank you for being a part of this. This was, oh man, this was a spirited one. It escalated, and you were the one who escalated it. So I should expect that from our Dark Lord and Savior. Doobie, thank you for being here, and tell a little about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Doobie. I help run the Politics of Run Discord. It's at discord.gg/politics. I actually wanted to do this during the panel, but we kind of got went all over the place, and I forgot. It was in my notes. But I wanted to acknowledge, I didn't want to just call out Joe, Mr. Girl. I wanted to call out myself too, right, for some irresponsible wordplay that I engaged in. So if it's okay, I'll take like 2 minutes to do that right now.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So, what was it? Last weekend or the weekend before? I think the Sunday before this last weekend, or it might have been last Sunday. I honestly can't remember. The weeks are kind of blurred together. Prem, you and I were on a panel that Mad Lab put together. And with Mr. Girl was there, Anna Furls was there, fucking who else was there?
Stardust.
Stardust was there, my beautiful friend Stardust, Zonia, my other beautiful friend. Lots of nice people. Hans, great
Politically
guy.
Provoked.
Politically Provoked, Brittany. Yeah, it was a total shit show, as can be expected with all of us on the same panel. At the end of the panel, and it wasn't at the end. It was like about 20 minutes to the end of the panel, right? I called out the so just kind of give you like the story for people in chat. I called out initially myself, right? I was like, hey Prime, why the fuck do you platform me? I convince people not to like democracy sometimes, and I convince people to think porn is bad, and I corrupt your beautiful women in chat with my frog dick constantly, right? And then we went to Vivian, and then we went to what was the other one? Mr. Girl. I was going to do Mr. Girl. No, then I went to Stardust because Mr. Girl left, right? And then at the end of it, the fourth person was Queen Alexa, who was a person that like I wasn't aware that she was like organizing the panel or involved at all. Oh no, I was aware that she was involved, but not that she was like as involved as she apparently was. So this person was accused of some not so good things. I was very irritated about this. And about 20 minutes to the end of the panel, I brought it up. I was like, hey, how do you guys feel about growing this person's platform? And I feel like I know that I should have thought this through. I still feel totally justified in bringing up the accusations publicly. So they're very, very serious accusations, right? But I brought them up with the understanding that I have, right? So getting this from somebody that I've known for like 5 years, I trust very much their reading of this and what they say that they've heard from the other person involved. And I brought this up and I threw that at you guys and I threw this at Alexa, not really thinking through how when you guys were presented with the public evidence, it wouldn't be as strong as what I know on the back end in my interactions with these people that are unfortunately private. And I feel like doing that, and then afterwards going on to like 2 other streams. Well, and then that I deleted the Discord server, by the way, which I still feel totally justified. But afterwards, I went on like 2 or 3 other streams for like 5-6 hours, maybe like 8 hours, right? Defending this decision, right, and going through all the public evidence with these people. And the public evidence, without all the other context, is really difficult to defend, or it's not very convincing on its own, right? So, and I feel like, given that I do think that the other person involved was a victim in the situation, bringing this up publicly when the public evidence isn't very convincing to most people, I think it's very difficult to bring people on board with that being, with this being actually like a bad thing that happened. I think it was really irresponsible to me, because not only did it lead to this person's private issue becoming a public issue again, where they had a ton of problems dealing with it the last time it got public, but it also made it seem like, there's that trope where, hey, sometimes women who accuse other people of rape or sexual assault or sexual harassment, they're liars, right? And you just shouldn't believe them. And I think I contributed to that because the public evidence was just lacking, right? And I did that unintentionally. So I feel like that was really irresponsible of me. So I wanted to call myself out too. So I figured I'd do that now. So that's my closing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Thanks so much for Doobie in chat for his Discord server. April, last save you for last. April, I was so happy to have you here. I think you did a bang up job. You crushed it, and you did such a great job making your points, right? Like you were very eloquent. I would be ecstatic to have you here in the future, really on this program or something else that I do. So yeah, April, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Follow me at Taftaj. It's on the screen. Hard to pronounce and write, but definitely follow me. And thank you so much, PrimeCayes. I definitely had a lot of fun.
Awesome. Hey, this is a random question, right? I saw pictures of you, but you seem what's your ethnicity? What do you go
I'm
by?
half Jewish and like a quarter Swedish, quarter random European.
Okay, all right. You seem like you must be mixed somehow. And you just have an interesting look. That's all. But I was just curious. Thank you so much for that. Anyway, yeah, thank you for being here. We would love to have you back. So to my audience, we're going to continue on with Open Walk On panel after this, as we always do. So stick around for that. Anyone here can join us, but if not, that's okay. Thanks for spending your time, your energy, and your passion with my community. I know they appreciate just as much as I do. Have a good one. Bye.
Take care.